It is.
These things get messed around with depending on decisions.
It was so dirty.
Sorry. Okay.
No problem. All right. Welcome to the Ojai Unified School District Board meeting for February. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. This is our first regular board meeting that's being televised, and so we're excited about this new era. We had our board retreat on Saturday, and we had our January meeting about a week before that, so I think we're getting pretty good at meetings at this point, hopefully. We'd like to begin by approving the agenda and also talking about emergency additions and modifications.
So I have two. One is technical, the other is a little more substantive. You'll note at the beginning of the agenda, item number 1, talked about a closed session either before this meeting or later, after our open session. We were able to have that closed session, and so when we come back into open session in item number 10, the board will have already deliberated in closed session about the student expulsion case, and we can act on it. Also in section 9, which would be the substantive discussion in closed session, we are now actually deferring that until March 11th to be accommodating to the employee involved. And so when the board reconvenes in open session for item number 10, they'll be taking action on the student expulsion and also essentially extending what was going to be a deliberation tonight in closed session and action potentially from February 3rd to March 11th. So if anybody's watching in open session at the end of this meeting, you'll hear that the board, I'll be recommending that the board simply change the date of that hearing from February 3rd to March 11th. So that's sort of the technical part. Then the more substantive issue is represented in this document that I'm giving the board, and I have been in pretty constant communication with members during the day to get everybody prepared for tonight, but you never know when something's going to arise that is a bit of a curveball. So I'm going to sort of summarize what's in this document. It relates to actually the first item under special presentations, which is 6.1, and it sort of goes this way. The board came here on Saturday. We had a pretty neat conversation about how we operate, and we began to take a look at a couple of important issues: declining enrollment and all the ramifications of that, and also the concept of selling or leasing all or part of some of our properties. When the board left, they walked out with a couple of pounds worth of paper to read for tonight. And one of those, a good part of that paper, was found in a 95-page document, which is part of agenda item 6.1. Pretty soon after we hear from Daniel, is it Danielle also? Yes, Danielle, I like that. You, Luke, talk. Okay. We have two Danielles over here.
I'm Danielle.
I know, Danielle, sorry. Spelled differently, and said differently, exactly. After we hear from Danielle. And public comments. We'll be getting to item 6.1, and we have a special person with us tonight, our financial advisor. So in that 95-page document, there's a whole variety of conversation about a potential bond sale coming up in the next, month or two months or so, depending on how our various elements unfold. We're going to meet with Moody's, etc. In any case, here's the deal. We found in the materials that we were sent by our bond counsel a separate resolution, which is a 29-page document, right, that was not included in the board materials. My rule, is we all talked about on Saturday, is to try to make sure that everything that needs to be in the board's hands is in the board's hands. Everything is noted in public when we put everything on the website. And so this resolution that we have now to distribute to you tonight wasn't in those materials. So we just found that out at 3:30 this afternoon. Now, I conferred with not only a bond counsel, but also with John. And what I believe is the best course of action is to not move ahead tonight to ask you to approve the bond resolution. And John will explain far better than I can why that is the right thing to do. Number one, I think it's the right thing to do because you didn't have the document. Okay. Secondly, it's actually not necessary, as we've learned in the last day plus, to approve the resolution tonight, because if we go ahead and do it on March 11th, that would be the same time that we would be looking at our second interim budget report, therefore projecting for 2015-16, and those would be the data that we want to use to present when we go to San Francisco to meet with Moody's, with John, and with Danny, and with me. So tonight, then, I would say 6.1 is transiting from a request for you to approve all of this, everything you saw, to have to read a little more, right, including the 29-page document, hear from John, converse with John, and understand then that we'll be moving toward, if you feel good about what you've heard and you feel like the March 11th date is a good date to approve moving ahead with a sale, then we would put it on the March 11th agenda. As you'll hear from John, there's no magic date to do this. We wanted to get at it as early as possible, potentially tonight, but now looking like March 11th, because, as he'll explain, the interest rates are superior, and Danny can continue to work with us through whatever time she's still here. So 6.1 is changing from action to information, is the best way to put it, okay? But we have John here, and that's a very important piece of the whole process. So those are my two modifications.
I just have one question.
Sure.
About approving the bond, the resolution. How many votes are needed to approve it? Do you need
I think it's, John, is it three? It's not four. This is just three. Okay, it's not one of those special four votes.
Okay.
You know, there's a narrow band of issues where you need four votes. We know one for sure.
Yes.
Right? In order to get something on the ballot.
Because I won't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
On March 11th.
And but we also know, I don't know if you're available or not, but Ricky was available in Italy, right? So
I have no idea where
if you would like, if you are available and you can post, right? We know the rules, right? If you can post the agenda on the door where you are.
I can't in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, we can get you. This is sounding not likely.
I don't think so.
She at least was in a hotel room in Italy.
Yeah, she had a phone.
Okay. Anyway, hopefully 3 of the other 4 will approve.
Great.
Okay, is that okay?
Absolutely.
Those are modifications.
So with those modifications, can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
Second. All right, all in favor? Aye. Wonderful, that's unanimous. Then on to approval of the minutes from our last regular meeting.
I'll move to approve.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain, I was at you.
Okay. Great, so now it's time for a student report. Daniel Lugatov.
Hello. So last Friday, on January 30th, we held our winter sports rally where we honored winter sports and recognized special students and outstanding staff members, including our associate teachers, the presidents of Owl Club, and Kelsey Thomas, whose work through Interact Club helped fund the rescue of girls who had been sold into sex slavery. That evening, we encouraged students to attend our boys' basketball game by charging them half off if they had bought a dance ticket in advance. Immediately following the basketball game, we hosted our second annual Morph Dance in the cafeteria. We sold around 250 tickets, and it was a complete success. It was so much fun. Next week, we will be holding the Pennies for Patients fundraiser. This will be a homeroom run competition. Second period classes will compete by bringing in spare change. All proceeds go to benefit the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. We are working on creating a do's and don'ts video to give students information about the upcoming WASC visit. Hopefully going to explain what WASC is and what to expect. For example, maybe a do smile, don't roll your eyes. So we have just started talking about our Spring Spirit Week, which will take place during the week of March 16th through the 20th and will end in our spring rally.
Excellent report, thank you. Are there any questions, or?
I just I'm so happy that Kelsey got an award. She was co-president of Interact Club last year.
She did great, yeah.
She did a great job.
She did a great job. I'm pretty sure she raised over $1,000 for this, so she was recognized. She got a plaque and everything from this organization, so.
That's awesome.
It was cool.
And how was the more alternative prom different from a real prom again?
It's definitely more casual, neon colors, no dresses, so.
No dates necessary?
What?
No dates?
No dates, total opposite from prom, so.
Other than that, it's exactly like a prom.
But it was a more.
Exactly, it was opposite, so, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Danielle. And as is the case, you're welcome to stay. You're also welcome to go and do homework.
Okay, as much as I would love to say, I do have soccer practice.
Well,
so.
soccer practice is very important.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Take care.
You too.
Go Rangers, thanks. Okay, it is time for public comments. I have one speaker form from Kent Houston.
Wait a minute, Danielle. This 3 minutes doesn't start till.
It's 3 minutes.
3 minutes, it doesn't start till I
He's
actually.
going to say something, I think.
Now, you guys, I didn't know you were in such company of awesomeness. I've taught hundreds of Ojai students, and to hear her just read that, if you don't know her, you need to get to know her. She's one of my favorite all-time students.
That was time well spent.
She hardly achieved anything after 6th grade.
For some of you, my words may feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but we have some new people on the board, and I just wanted to thank you for the important community role that you've chosen and welcome you. And I'd like to share a couple thoughts. I grew up in Ojai, went to all the public schools, moved out of state, got a master's degree in education, and I started teaching in 1980. And most of those years have been back here in Ojai. We've got excellent schools. I love my job, and I'd do it all again if I had the chance. I've seen a lot of changes in my 35 years of teaching, but I can honestly tell you that so much more is expected from teachers than ever before. It's an extremely challenging and demanding job, and it should be. It should be. But unlike the past, it's beginning to take its toll. Compared to most similar professions, we're on the lower end of compensation, but that's not a secret. You know, we all knew that when we chose to become educators. Most of us entered for passion, not profit. However, you probably guessed there was going to be a however there. We've not only not had a raise in 7 years, our salaries have declined. I'm sure you're aware of this. Well, the cost of most everything else has gone up. For the first few years, during the decline, many of us felt, a duty. We sucked it up for the district, our students, we saved programs, we saved jobs, and then we took some furlough days to help balance the budget. And besides, we live in Ojai. It's a paradise to live in Southern California in this town. We have awesome people and great students to work with. However, the accumulation of hits has created a hurt for many of the district employees. And through all of this, I've really appreciated Dr. Bangster's continual acknowledgement of these hardships. He is the first one to say he knows we've been through some tough times. I'm at the end of my career, and while my retirement account has slipped for the past several years, an increased salary won't affect me much. I only have a couple years left, but I'm here to speak for the core people of Ojai that will be the strength of these schools for maybe the next 15 years. They need an increase in pay yesterday. Man, as soon as possible. Even though they will never recover what they've lost. Contrary to public opinion, teachers don't live to teach, they teach to live. Many of us will be retiring in the near future, and Ojai must be able to attract the best and the brightest of educators, and our students deserve nothing less. Thank you for the time you've signed up for and committed to, that I know you've given already, and that I know you're going to give to the people of Ojai in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Agenda item 6.1, the discussion of our bonds.
Right. So I've given you a bit of an introduction to this introduction. So you know what we're not doing tonight and what we may be doing on March 11th. I mentioned to the board just as we were coming in a couple of minutes before that we have lots of color-coded stuff here tonight to be sure everything is accurate. So you have the white quick email that I wrote just a little bit before this meeting. This you already received if you were able to open up your email on time. So this is not new. This is something I sent about 12:30 today, so you may have already read it. If that's the case, then just put it on your pile. But I want to be sure that you have notes from me that help move us through this meeting. In particular, on this agenda item, 6.1, you have a separate email from John to me, John Isom to me, on the second page. So you'll see the outline of what he intends to do tonight. Let me talk a little bit about John without going overboard. Danny and I had a chance to reflect a bit today in response actually to a board member's question about how did John Isom come to be? Okay, and
Your birth story was amazing.
Yeah, it was. He came to be, as a lot of young people, including I have to say my son, who just did something very similar to what John did. He worked in the business of bond advising and how to pass campaigns and all that for a company, and then decided he could carve out his own career, and he did it. He's doing the same work, but now, a better part of a decade later, in his own company, John Isom Advisors, and he's done exceptionally well. And he's done exceptionally well because of a combination of real intellect and personality. And John will tell you that I'm not necessarily the easiest client he ever worked for when it came to getting things all in order. But he's very resilient, and he doesn't back off if he thinks he's right, which I really appreciate. So we work with John in this room quite a bit on refinancing of our former bonds, or older bonds. Now we have new ones, thank goodness. And then we signed up with John to work with us, the board, in the area of advising us about how to move to consider a measure, and then, if the measure passed, to be our financial advisor, which is really why he's here tonight. On a secondary level, he also worked for the committee on which we also know that Kathy Smith was a key person. That was the campaign committee. So he was an advisor to the campaign committee, separate entity, separate contract, had nothing to do with the district, no district funds, I want to underscore that, and it was all done through donations to help finance them. So John's here tonight to talk with us about, now that we passed this Measure J in November, what comes next? What are some options? Who are the people who work with him to help advise us? And what's the calendar of all this, which is really open, and as I said, when we enter tonight, sort of moving pretty fast toward getting these bonds sold, maybe in and around spring break with a resolution tonight. Could still happen, could around spring break if we pass it on the 11th of March. But anyway, John, that's my introduction to you.
Wow. I have to say that's the best introduction I've ever had. Thank you, Hank. And good evening, members of the board and community. It is a pleasure to be here, and a hearty congratulations on successful Measure J. This is, one of several different board meetings I've had the opportunity to stand in front and give folks an overview of the process, and also to extend the congratulations, and also give thanks for the opportunity to work with the district. I have had a long working relationship with the district, and they've always been very professional, very responsive to all the requests that we ask of them. And there's a lot of information when we're talking about issuing bonds, millions of dollars of bonds, there's certainly a high level of expertise that goes into it and a high level of attention to detail. So kudos to the district for all that they've done for us as well. So as Hank pointed out, I really want to spend just a little bit of time this evening giving you guys an overview of how bonds work. Some of you were on the board, obviously, when the bond election was called, and some of you are new. So I want to make sure that I'm able to give you guys a sense of the process, certainly give specific attention to the legal aspect of that process, which is part of the documents that you have this evening, and then discuss the timeline going forward, and then obviously answer any questions that you guys have. But just to step back for a second, when you talk about bonds and when you talk about districts that have the authority granted to them by voters, and in this case that authority was granted at the November election, voters approved an authorization amount of $35 million, and now the district has at their option to sell different bond series of that $35 million authorization. What goes into that is a couple of things. First off, there's the finance team, if you will, and the finance team members. And not necessarily spending a lot of time on each. You typically have a bond counsel, and that's the bond attorney who's responsible for drafting legal documents and certainly ensuring that these bonds meet the IRS requirements for tax-exempt status. That's one of the key certifications and opinions that they provide at the end of the day, is to say these bonds are tax-exempt eligible. Okay? We also have a party called the Underwriter, and in this instance, the district, the last couple of financing opportunities, has used the firm of George K. Baum. And there are many different underwriters throughout the state. We engaged in a process to select what we felt was the most appropriate and certainly the most competitive on fees. And an underwriter's role is pretty simple. They purchase the bonds that are being offered by the district, and they in turn sell them to their pool of investors. Oftentimes they don't find enough investors to buy the entire bond amount. So in this instance, if we're contemplating a $10 million issue, maybe they only find investors for $6 million or $7 million. They then underwrite the balance. And that means they say, all right, we'll take some risk. We'll buy the bonds today. We'll make sure that Hank and Danny, you guys have all your money today, and then over the next week or two or month, we'll try to find buyers for those bonds. But we're willing to take that risk and underwrite that and really transfer the risk away from the district to the underwriter. Also, as part of the process, the district is going to get a credit score. And we seek out credit scores from rating agencies, Moody's or Standard & Poor's, and sometimes both. They play an important role because the better our credit score is, the cheaper it is for us to borrow money. Just like your FICO score or your individual score, if you went to go to the bank to get a mortgage, if you have a good credit score, they'll give you a lower interest rate. The same is true for school districts. So we also have the rating agencies as part of the process. A couple of smaller, participants, if you will. You have a printer that prints up some of the legal documentations, the investor's prospectus. For any investor that wants to buy bonds, they usually have a document that they review. That's about a centimeter thick. That's most of the 95 pages that you guys had for your review. That's the preliminary official statement. And then you have what's called a paying agent. Their role is fairly simple, and that's to take tax collections from the tax revenues that are levied and then deposit them with what's called DTC, or the Depository Trust Company. And it's DTC is this basically this Federal Reserve that is responsible for paying all the investors. So anytime an investor lends money, to get their money back or to get interest payments back, they get that from DTC. And so the paying agent plays a very, again, somewhat of a small role, an important role nonetheless, but a role of taking tax collections, getting them deposited, making sure that's the right amount, et cetera, so that those investors are made whole. Our role, financial advisors, is that of fiduciary. I mean, we manage the entire process with an eye towards what's the most economical and financial beneficial moves as far as selling the district's bonds. So, we don't represent investors, we don't represent the underwriters. We're on the side of the district saying we want the lowest interest rates and we want the cheapest cost of borrowing, and that's the role of financial advisor. So that's the role that we play. If I were to break up a bond sale into 3 steps, step 1 would be the legal documents and establishing the parameters that are going to ultimately govern what we're doing here. And I'll since most of my comments I think will be focused on the legal documents, let's put that aside for a second. Step 2 is getting the bonds prepped for sale. And that entails getting the bonds rated and then getting the bonds insured. And then a third step is pricing the bonds and actually closing the bonds, which means getting the dollars deposited into the construction fund. So as far as the second and third step, because I want to go back and, like I said, have a fair amount of focus on the legal documents, getting the bonds prepped is a pretty straightforward process. Unlike an individual where they just give you your credit score, we actually get to make our case. And we get to go to San Francisco, we get to sit in front of analysts, and we get to say, this is why Ojai Unified is a great place for investors to put their money. And we get to talk about our financials, we talk about the management, we talk about you, we talk about enrollment, we talk about our school sites, and certainly we talk about the underlying tax base, economy, and assessed value, because that's the source of repayment on a bond program. So we put our best foot forward, we negotiate a little bit with these analysts, and then they assign us a rating. Depending on where that rating falls, we may elect to pursue insurance. Now, this is the part that is very counterintuitive, because when we buy insurance, typically when you buy insurance, it's because if something bad happens, insurance is there to make you whole, right? In the history of California, there's never ever been a general obligation bond that has defaulted. And that's because of the legal structure by which general obligation bonds are set up. Simply put, it's an unlimited ad valorem tax. What does that technically mean? That means if tomorrow there was a meteor that came in and wiped out half of Ojai, the non-populated portion, and we lost half of the assessed value in the district. We went from $3 billion to $1.5 billion, and we owed $35, because that's what we told voters the tax rate would be. And the next year we still owed $35, but yet we only have half of the assessed value. The county assessor, or the tax collector more correctly, would simply levy a tax of $70. We have half the value, all right, I need to double the tax, and that value will be sufficient to make those bondholders whole. So then why would you ever get insurance if you know that it's 100% guaranteed? Because investors throughout the country who buy these bonds have minimum criterias and will be willing to take a lower interest rate if our bonds are AA, because we have purchased an insurance policy that now qualifies us as a AA credit, whereas without the insurance, we may only be A. So it's a cost-benefit analysis. Simply put, we say, all right, it's going to cost us $50,000 to buy this insurance policy, but it means interest rates are going to be lower by 10 basis points for each maturity. That's going to save us $230,000. Well, that's a net plus of $180,000. So in that case, we buy the insurance. So that's the stage of prepping the bonds, getting them rated and possibly insured. The pricing of the bonds is a pretty straightforward process. It usually entails a 2-day negotiation with the underwriter and the district. Sometimes the county gets on the line. But basically an underwriter proposes interest rates, structure, maturities, coupons for 25 unique years, and then we help negotiate on behalf of the district. Well, we think those interest rates are too high, or we think that's not the right type of bonds that should be sold. So there's a pre-pricing call and a pricing call, and then if there's an agreement, and typically there is, but we make a recommendation to the district, we think that this is fair, commensurate with what the marketplace is, and then the bonds are sold officially, and then 2 weeks later, bonds are deposited into the district's construction fund. Okay. So, if I can segue, and if there's any questions, I guess I'm happy to take them as we go. If you have any questions on the process thus far, or I can take them at the end. I don't know if the district has a preference.
Now you're going to go to a bigger chunk?
I'm going to go to the legal aspect and really what you guys have before you.
Yeah, are there questions about the process so far?
Yeah, I got a couple. First, how are you compensated? How are you as our advisor compensated?
We are paid out of bond proceeds at the time of the close of the bond sale. And that's true of all the different finance participants, whether it's the underwriter, the bond counsel, they all get paid out of proceeds at the time of the sale.
And has your percentage been established at this point?
Well, one good thing about the fiduciary is we can't charge on a percent. So it's a fixed fee that was negotiated with the district several months ago before even getting put on the ballot. But we have a fixed fee. The underwriter is on a percent because that's how they're compensated, and then all other participants are fixed fee.
Gotta ask, what's the fixed fee?
For each bond sale for us, it's $65,000. We also have a pre-planning fee of $20,000. It's a one-time, and it's really all of the work leading up to the approval of a resolution calling the election. But at this point forward, any subsequent bond sale would just be the one-time, or excuse me, would be the $65,000 financial advisory fee.
And when you say a bond sale, you're referring to, like, as we're talking about now, $10,000 chunk or $10 million chunk this time, that's a bond sale?
Correct.
We might do $15 million next time, that's a bond sale?
Correct, yeah, anytime you know, usually a year or two or three or four pass, and then anytime you're going to do that process, all of those steps that I outlined earlier need to be done again, the rating, the insurance, the resolution, the board meeting, et cetera. So each time that represents a bond sale, correct.
And I didn't know that much about pricing in bonds at all, but I studied economics. So the thing I was sort of struggling with is, you mentioned the underwriter might have a risk because the underwriter might end up with inventory of bonds that they couldn't sell, so they have to buy it themselves. Isn't that a function of pricing though? If you price it properly, then you're by definition going to have people to buy it, right?
See, great question. Hypothetical, Danny and I say, we've got Ojai bonds for 10%. How many people would buy a 10% return guarantee on your money? Everyone in this room should, okay? That means the bonds were priced too high, even though we got rid of them all.
Right.
Danny and I go out, we say, hey, we have 1%. Anyone want to buy some 1% bonds for 25 years? You'll get 1% on your money. You'll get no buyers. So really the expertise, if you will, is to find that fine line between enough demand so that you're able to sell the majority, but not sell all of the bonds. And then that is one indication for us to say, you know what, we priced these bonds correctly because the underwriter can't find enough buyers for all of them. That means the interest rate's not quite the 10%, but it's not quite the 1%. So we like to see an underwriter take anywhere from 15 to 40% into their inventory. And we look at that next to, you know, comparable bond sales that are being sold at the same time to give us a gauge of, all right, how hard do we push? Because we could say, hey, Wainimi down the hill, they just priced 2 weeks ago, and here are their rates. Why are we getting, you know, worse rates than Wainimi? So that's where that negotiation comes into play. But yeah, we always like to make sure that they underwrite a good chunk of it because we know we want them to take that risk, and we know that's where the market is.
And would you mind talking a little bit about the process that you went through with respect to recommending Baum, George K. Baum as the underwriter? You said that there was a process, and I think you indicated you felt that they were the best choice. Yeah,
I mean, you know, an underwriter, if they heard this, they would disagree, but I view many underwriters as somewhat of a commodity in that they're big banks, they've got deep pockets, and their role is to buy bonds and then in turn find investors to sell them to. So I would say that we're very price conscious. But not solely fixated on price, but also performance. Because you could get an underwriter that has a very low price, low cost, or a low fee, but if their interest rates are terrible, then the collective cost of borrowing is not a win for the district. So at the time, we reached out to a couple of different firms. Piper Jaffray comes to mind, George K. Baum, I would assume a third or even a fourth, because that's just been our standard practice. And we said, all right, what would your proposed fees be to work with this district, the Ojai Unified School District? Fees came in, performance was evaluated. I think, and again, this is probably about 3 or 4 years ago, but our standard practice generally is go with one of, if not the lowest in fees among capable underwriters, those that have a good track record. So what I'm saying is we don't invite those that have a poor track record to bid. So then when we do evaluate it, we're able to evaluate based on lowest cost.
And when they sell the bonds, I did a little research today, try to get myself a little ready. It seems like there is a prospect of a placement versus an auction. Is that something that...
There's 3 approaches. One is private placement versus public sale. So I think you may be combining a couple of concepts here. So private placement means we just go find one bank who's not going to sell it to their investors. The bank says, I just want to take these bonds and I want to buy them myself. Bank of America, I just want to put bonds in my pocket and I'll take the interest myself. That's a private placement versus a public offering. A public offering, you have to literally offer it to the public, at least 10%. It's got to be a bona fide public offering. And the objective here is to sell it to other participants who in turn may decide to Charles Schwab or an Edward Jones. They may say, well, I'll buy the bonds from the underwriter and then I'm going to sell them to my investors, okay? So step one is what makes the most economic sense to the district? Do you do a private or do you do a public? Typically, small denominations, smaller bonds, $1 million, $2 million bonds, you're able to get better savings, in my opinion, with a private placement. Costs of issuance are cheaper, but interest rates tend to be a little higher because that bank is, they have their own underwriting criteria. If you decide to do a public offering, which is where we're at now, then the choice becomes, do you do an auction or what's called a competitive sale, or do you do a negotiated sale? An auction simply is we throw it out to all the underwriting community and whoever puts in the lowest bid wins. A negotiated sale means we pre-select an underwriter that we think is going to give us good rates at a good price, and then we have that negotiation process. Now, criteria as to, well, when do you do competitive versus when do you do negotiated? I would draw the analogy of maybe art. If you had a Picasso that you found at a local flea market, would you go take it to the Ojai art dealer, or would you say, hey, let's go to London and take it to, one of the big auction houses? You'd probably take that Picasso to one of the big auction houses because you get a lot of bids and a lot of demand. I've got an uncle in Oregon. I don't know if you've heard of Brad Isom. He's a great watercolor painter. No one's heard
Got 4 of them.
I'll let him know. There's great Southwest watercolors. No one knows about him, okay?
Why is he in Oregon if he's in forget?
I know. Well, he grew up in Southern Utah. So he sells to family, and he also sells to very regional locations, right? So in this instance, we have to evaluate, is Ojai closer to Brad Isom or is he closer to Picasso? Or are you somewhere in the middle? And when you're selling bigger bonds, certainly a well-known credit, that's something that the industry responds to and I think is favorable and an argument for a competitive sale. Because if you do a competitive sale and it's a Brad Isom and you only get one bid, you got to take it. So the evaluation that we look at is, all right, High Unified School District, high single A credit, decent sized bond, not going to knock anyone's socks off. How much demand are we going to get? In this case, we recommend a negotiated sale.
And Danny had sent me something today on the rate that the underwriter gets at 0.65%, is that right?
0.65.
Okay. Thanks very much, great answers.
You bet, great questions.
I would like to comment as well that the refinance that John brought to us to evaluate and to do saved the taxpayers in Ojai quite a lot of money. It didn't benefit the district, but it saved the taxpayers, so we thought that was a great benefit, and thanks to John for that. My other comment is when I first started my career, I was an underwriter and focusing on municipal finance and did quite a lot of school financings. So it's very different to sit on this side of the table at these board meetings. And John actually lives where I started my career. So it's fun to see him and this same dynamic and look through all these documents, and it's wonderful not to have to write them. So that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
You bet.
Actually, John, I had one other thing, super small thing, but I thought I read that typically bond counsel should be chosen by the underwriter, and if the issuer chooses bond counsel, that there needs to be some special disclosure. Are you familiar with that at all?
No, and I've actually never seen that in practice where the underwriter would select bond counsel.
Okay.
Underwriters sometimes have their own counsel, but they're called underwriters counsel.
Okay.
That represent kind of the investing side. But bond counsel, you really want, the issuer really wants their own bond counsel. Again, not to say that underwriters, are evil, but they do represent investors.
Right.
And financial advisors and to some degree bond counsel represent the district.
I haven't been an underwriter for a long time. But the bond counsel on this is Jones Hall, correct?
Yes.
And they are one of the premier bond counsel firms. I worked with them many years ago, and they have always been excellent.
And I think they've served the district very well. So speaking of bond counsels and legal the documents before you this evening, essentially what is going to be asked of you at a subsequent board meeting will be to approve a resolution. And that resolution is in its final form, and it's the authorizing resolution. And it does a few things. First, it provides direction to the district administration or representative to complete these other form documents that were part of this packet. So those form documents, if you saw, you had a bond purchase agreement that had a lot of blanks. That's the agreement between the district and the underwriter. But we don't know exactly how many bonds we're going to sell and what interest rate and what dollar denominations, how many years, et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be a few blanks on there, but they're in form. They're in form. The other document that you have, the larger, is the preliminary official statement, and that's that investor's prospectus. So if you wanted to buy Ojai bonds and you wanted to learn anything you wanted to know about Ojai, specifically the bonds that are being offered, you would look at that preliminary official statement. It includes the district's audits. It has the district's ADA history, enrollments, schools, employee relations, administrators, board members, as well as all the economic data. Your assessed value, who the top 20 taxpayers are in the district, what the secured overlapping debt and tax rates look like. So if you're an investor and you really want to get into the nitty-gritty about details about the district to say, do I invest in Ojai or do I invest in Wainimi? That would be the document that folks would look at. Again, that too is in form. There are a number of blanks because, again, we don't know what those will be until the bonds are finally priced. But by approving this resolution, the district will, again, provide direction to district staff and representatives to complete those documents. It also provides direction to the county to establish a couple of accounts. One is a debt service account to make payments. When those tax collections come in, they go into a pot that's dedicated to you. There's also another account, and that's the project fund. So when the bonds are sold, dollars go into that pot, and that's the account by which the district will draw from to make its facility improvements. There's also language with respect to some of the other just general covenants and a fair amount of legalese that go into it. The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, other Prop 39 obligations that the district would be committing to. But really that resolution is the key document to be focusing on. And that's what really sets the ball in motion and allows us to continue down that process of selling bonds on behalf of the district. And I know there's a lot of documents there, so any questions on?
Just a couple of little ones.
Yeah.
I've heard this concept, capital appreciation bonds. That has nothing to do with what we're doing, right? Excellent.
Correct.
Excellent.
Yeah, some of the legalese, because I think there was another question, is just kind of the boilerplate. So there'll be a maximum interest rate of 8% and a tax rate of $60. We're going nowhere near 8%. We're going nowhere near $60. Those are statutory references to Prop 39 bonds. And so some of those things that you see, it's again that legalese.
Also, as part of the district financials, you know we don't have any reserves. I'm sure that's not helpful. But
Wow.
I would say, yes, we do have reserves.
We do have
Just small.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't submit that parking expense. So we're good. Is our property, real estate, is that asset valued as part of this process? And is that
Specifically Ojai Unified School District's assets?
Yes.
I would say if they are currently being, I guess, capitalized and that there were any revenues, that would be something that the rating agencies and investors might care about. There are certain districts that make quite a bit of money through the use of their surplus school sites, leasing it to different agencies. That tends to be a credit plus. Just having schools at the high school, the middle school, that's probably not something that's going to be a credit plus. It would just be neutral more than anything. So it kind of depends on what you do.
Yeah, we have this large 8 acres here that's up for discussion currently. I was just wondering if this chunk of land is appraised and gives us any kind of extra ballast and something like that.
Yeah, not until it gets a little bit more down the path of either accessing funds for it if you were to sell it or accessing funds if you were to lease it.
Thanks.
I just have a question then about the bond purchase agreement template. It mentions the district representative. Are we supposed to decide who that district representative is? And because it says the president of the board or the superintendent or the chief business official.
again, out of practice, it's almost always the superintendent or the chief business official. That language remains boilerplate, if you will, in that instance until it comes time for the close. And at that point in time, depending on timing, and we'll talk about timing last year, if Danny is gone and Hank's the one that is here, Hank is typically the person that would be signing a lot of those closing documents and be the designated representative.
I think that might be identified in the resolution, but I'm not sure. We should check on that when we get the resolution. Are there other?
Well, it's actually, I mean, it looks like he's just executing the documents that we approved.
Right, we would have to approve it
Yeah.
before. Yeah. Linda?
John's answered all my questions.
Just one thing, and you may be getting to this later, but just ask it now or I'll
Please.
forget. And it relates to timing and the market generally. I just got a refi and I got a killer rate. And I'm assuming that's why we want to move now on bond sales as well, because cost of money right now is pretty low.
Yes, and to that point, segue, if I may, to the timeline. On the back side of this, I think it's of interest, but there's just a reference to the assessed value of the district historically, as well as kind of an updated bond issuance calendar. But I'd like to point your direction to the more detailed aspect of the timeline. And much of this we've covered. The first third speaks much to the legal documentation, sending out drafts, getting comments back from finance team members, sending out drafts, getting comments back, culminating with about, in the middle it says February 3rd, but that would now be revised to March as the district board approves the bond resolution and the POS. Subsequent to that approval, we would have the rating agency meeting in San Francisco, again with Moody's, possibly S&P, to get that credit score that we talked about earlier. We'd also submit a packet to the insurers to potentially look at getting insurance for those. And then once we have insurance, once we have credit, a credit rating, once we've got all the legal parameters established and approved, then we would post or print, as they say, the preliminary official statement. And then that's out there for about a week. And that's when the underwriter does pre-marketing and starts talking to their investors and say, I've got this great credit, Ojai Unified School District, there's bonds that we've sold before, you really want to be sharpening the pencil and giving us a good bid, et cetera, et cetera. Now, per this timeline, this shows a pricing date of April 1, and then there's always a customary 2-week close. But to your question earlier, Michael, about timing, interest rates are very low. And one thing that the district, when it closes, certifies is that they reasonably expect to spend the bond proceeds within a 3-year period. The IRS does not want to let you guys get tax-free bonds and sit on them and then try to earn a couple of bucks earning interest. So they want these dollars put to work, they want it to go to jobs, they want it to go to improvements. So they gave you this 3-year window, and it's a reasonable test. We reasonably expect to spend our money within 3 years. And if the district thinks the answer to that question is yes, we reasonably expect to be able to spend the first $10 million over the next 3 years, then the second question is, when can we get the cheapest money? Because if we're going to sell now or next year or 18 months from now, all right, when can we get the cheapest money? We're going to sell it within 3 years. And you're right, there are killer rates out there. Interest rates are near historic lows. And I think that's one primary driving force, again, as the district's fiduciary, one primary driving force of why I think we should move rather quickly is because we can lock up $10 million and the associated $6 to $8 million in interest costs, versus if we wait a year, maybe that $10 million has $10 million in interest costs. So all those interest costs that we're obligating through future taxpayer payments over time mean less principal or less bond dollars you have for construction. So if the answer, again, to question number 1 is, yeah, we reasonably expect to spend this money within a 3-year period, then the next question is, all right, when can we get the cheapest money? And right now is a fantastic time to be in the market.
And what happens if, we begin, because we're talking about doing a master plan before we begin spending these funds. So if we complete that and we decide, here's the projects we want to go forward with our committee's recommendations, if it's not spent in those 3 years, what happens? Right, does it have to be? I mean, or there's a penalty or?
That's a good question. I don't want to say there's no consequences, but again, practically speaking, there are many districts that are sitting on monies from 4 years, 5 years, 6, 7 years ago. And we remind them, we say, hey, you're really supposed to get those dollars spent. So there is a reasonable test that I guess an attorney could speak to a little bit more appropriately than myself. But that reasonable test is, did you honestly, at the time you sold the bonds, believe you were going to spend those bond proceeds in 3 years? We did the math, and I think we said, all right, that means by summer of 2018, you're kind of on the outside of 3 years, not too far away. You're a couple of months after the 3-year period. That means the district has summer of 16, 17, and in my opinion, 18 to spend $10 million. I'd like to think that that's something that is achievable. And I think in our conversations, that is the belief that, yeah, we should clearly be able to spend all of those. The good news is that we don't have to allocate the $10 million to any specific projects today. The voters established that when they approved the project list and the full $35 million. So as long as you're spending, dollars that are associated with that project list and the oversight committee is going to ensure that, then there's no issue about, well, we don't know exactly how we're going to spend it or not. So the goal really should be, how do we get the cheapest money?
John, you said something conceptually. I kind of thought what Dane had said earlier was correct, which is that we get the money in its face value, and then the taxpayers either get a better or worse deal depending on the interest rate environment. You sort of suggested that we could actually lose some of the money we actually brought in. How would that work?
It wouldn't be so much so if you flip over to this side, and I apologize for those in the audience, it doesn't say that many great things. There's just 10 million in 2015, 15 million in 2017, and possibly 10 million in 2019. So just kind of a series breakdown. So what happens when interest rates are higher, future tax revenues that could otherwise go to pay for principal or bond proceeds for projects are not available because they're tied up in higher interest rates. So what would that mean? It does not mean you would not get your full 35 million. It might mean that instead of getting the second series in 17, you have to wait till 2018 because so many dollars are now tied up in interest. So that's, so I don't want to imply that the district doesn't get it, but it might delay it, or it might mean that if you issued in 17 instead of 15 million, okay, maybe you're only going to get 14 million. That 35 million does not have an expiration date on it. But the timing at which you get it and the dollar amounts at which you get it are largely driven by available tax revenues into the future. So the more we can get low interest rates, the better chance we have for accessing more and bonds sooner down the road.
When we told the voters $35 we felt like this was going to cost, that's for the total 35 million, right, or no?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not $35 each time we sell, but it should be leveled $35 throughout the life of the program.
I don't want to beat a dead horse. Maybe I'm sorry. I'm just slightly confused still. So when you said we'd be limited to go out, why wouldn't we just be able to go out at whatever schedule we feel is appropriate for the building we're doing? And what would be the problem that would cause us to have to delay doing that based on the interest rate problem? Could you describe that better?
Yeah, so let's just assume that this is the perfect issuance schedule.
Right.
And this would be great for the district's construction program, getting 10, 15, and $10 million every 2 years. And then let's assume that the first 10 million that we borrowed came at a pretty high cost. Interest rates went up dramatically, but we still borrowed $10 million. We've obligated 25 years worth of payments, tax payments for the local Ojai taxpayers. Now, if a good chunk of those payments are now interest, under my scenario here, we're assuming that we're going to get, a lower cost of borrowing, and so that we'll be able to keep to this particular schedule. But if that's not the case, what happens is that 15 million may get delayed a year. That 15 million may only become 13 million because we're limited by what $35 per 100,000.
That's it.
produces.
So that's it. That's the point, is that $35 starts to get in the way.
Correct.
That's it. Got it.
So it's the $35 right away, it's not, excuse me, $10 because we only borrowed 10 million.
Correct, $35 right away.
Rough.
Because essentially all three of these bond sales are going to be, woven together, if you will, overlaid, one on top of the other. And again, the objective here, voters approve $35, let's give them $35 in as cost-effective a manner we can.
And then to go back to the schedule, if rates are so great right now, we do want to try to stay as close to this as we can. By moving to March 11th, is that a bad?
That's a good question. I think in consultation, the concern about going now and representing to one of these rating agencies the district's first interim figures, as opposed to their second interim figures, which tell a much different story, concerns us. And if you were to get an A+ by waiting versus an A by not waiting, that's probably a greater risk than a month later where interest rates are today versus a month from now.
So it's greater benefit by waiting until March 11th.
That's the belief.
With the second interim, which is so spectacular. Everything's relative.
Yeah, I was going to say, everything's relative.
And for the audience, the second revised budget looks like we're basically breaking even, whereas the prior one looked like we were in a pretty big hole. So that's what you're saying is going out to ratings agencies and saying, hey, lend us money when we are in a hole is not as advantageous as going out and saying, hey, we look like we're doing okay.
Correct. The rating agency might look at you now and say, I'm a little nervous about your management or your finances. I'm going to give you an A, and I'm going to tell all those investors that Ojai is only an A district. And so they're going to adjust their interest rates accordingly. But if we were to wait and we think we can make the case to the rating agencies and they'll say, oh, you guys, your finances look good, A+, now that same pool of investors are going to be willing to take a lower interest rate because you're a stronger credit.
Can the audience submit this for credit? It's like a good class.
That'd be great.
Just to sort of not to cast a pall on our rating, but what would be a very strong rating for a school district?
Well, the highest the district can be is AAA.
AAA, right, I know that.
There's only about 8 districts in the state of California.
Right, so very strong,
Right.
top of the line.
Supremely strong. I mean, if you get into the AA, you're in the upper echelon of school districts.
So A+ is on the way.
A+ is very good, but the very strong is the AA credit. And you either have to be a very large tax base,
Yeah, that would be
or a very wealthy tax
hard to
base,
imagine.
or some combination of the two.
Well, we have wonderful taxpayers.
We voted.
And I think we need another big thank you to those who voted for the bonds. This is really a great benefit to the schools.
Got anything else here?
That's it for me.
Any other questions, comments? We really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
And travel and great advice. I feel very strongly that the success of this issue was in large part due to your good advice.
Appreciate it.
So thank
So
you.
John, just to clarify, so this 29-page document to which I referred, I have it here actually, but I'm sure you don't need to read it tonight. So between now and March 11th, all of the supporting documents that are part of this packet still pertain, and the only additional document is the technical resolution, right? And now so that we'll get all that, and that will be, that plus everything else here, will be approved if the board so chooses on March 11th. Then Danny and I will go with you up and we'll do our rating thing the next week. The only thing that might be missing, and you did talk about this, are filling in the blanks. So just couple more seconds on that. We fill in the blanks how?
We fill in the blanks by applying the information that we get on the day of the pricing,
Okay.
and including that in the bond purchase agreement and the preliminary official statement.
Okay.
So when you're selling bonds, there's 25 maturities, meaning 25 different years, 25 different par amounts, meaning dollar amounts that represent bonds for each year, 25 different coupons, 25 different yields,
So all those are
CUSIPs,
still,
all that
still
detail.
blank. They're all still
Correct.
blank when the board approves it.
Right,
Okay.
because we won't have that until the day of the pricing.
And the only thing that technically needs to be approved by the board is the 29 pages resolution. That's what, the other 2 documents that are in here are just the form.
Support. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good trip.
Wonderful. Okay, item 6.2, the Valley Oak Charter.
Okay, well, Laura, welcome.
Do you want me to stand up
No,
or
no,
just
not
sit?
quite yet.
I'm gonna sit right here.
Okay, so one of those couple inches of documents the board took on Saturday is in fact this very well done petition, just again to frame the timing. So the board is receiving this for information tonight, and then we'll hold a public hearing on March 11th, and if everything goes well, then the board would approve the 5-year petition for renewal. Laura, I know that there are other people other than you from Valley Oak Charter, so you do need to take a minute to introduce something. That person to your right you know very well. And you know this Nancy, welcome back. Good to see you.
No, you don't get to welcome her back.
I welcome you here. In your new iteration, great science teacher at Matilla.
I don't know if you're aware of this, Hank, but Nancy and Craig and I shared a hallway at Matilla.
Oh, really? No. Well, of course, Craig, welcome back. You were here for the high school petition, and congratulations on that. So I just wanted to let you know that Laura is the director of Valley Oak for now a decade or plus, right?
It's been a while, yeah.
Okay, is here and others with you, so thanks for coming. And Thane, I think that really is my introduction to the matter, and Laura can answer pretty much any question.
Yeah, Lauren, why don't you come up and tell us
Sure.
about this, and
Well,
we'll
first of
have
all,
any
I'd like to
comments and
introduce the
questions.
other folks who are here with us tonight, since they sat here and learned all about bonds.
There you go.
Which is pretty cool.
That's what happens when you're second, though.
I would like to point out that I have one of my students here. Rhea is here. Rhea's grandmother, who's sitting next to her, Christine Driggers, happens to be our office manager and Rhea's homeschool teacher. And Rhea, put it on your work record, okay, honey? I want to see it on it. Say, can we write it down at Valley Oak? Yes, you can. So we're going to put that down. We also have a couple other members of our parent community. Allison Jenkins is here with us tonight. She has 2 children in our program. And Beth and her son Nathan are here to visit with us tonight. Thank you guys for hanging out. I had no idea it was going to be always so long. Thank you for being here. And Lori Zatkowski, who is our programming director and has been an integral member of our team. I'm just so fortunate to work with these people. I really am so lucky. Happy to be here tonight. I'm assuming I'm not going to answer a whole lot of questions, but I'm here, and anything you'd like to ask me, I will make up an answer to. So go for it.
Fantastic. Any questions? Why don't we start on this side? Michael, do you have anything?
No, actually, I looked at a lot of this, but I still have a lot more to look at.
You know, I want to tell you, Mr. Shanahan, the first time I turned in for renewal here back in 2005, I think it was 21 pages, something along those lines. And then in 2010, it was around 40 or 50, and now we're up to 71, but honestly, it's not me. It really isn't us. Just the requirements get thicker and thicker.
Government.
I have a couple of things.
Sure.
First of all, I'm really amazed at a WASC accreditation
Thank
for
you.
our
We're very
homeschooling.
proud of
I've
ourselves
never
for
heard
that.
of that before, so.
It's pretty unusual. It
That's
actually is pretty unusual.
Amazing. And then I noticed you were talking about the fluctuation in the API scores, and
Yeah.
and have you, I don't know that I saw anything it says you're attempting, that you're looking for something, anything new to share that you're thinking of?
Well,
or-
there's a couple of things in this area. First of all, we've made a lot of headway with the Department of Education in having them actually recognize the fact that a program that bases its API and AYP on fewer generally than 50 students, because that's what we're looking at, that it really is statistically irrelevant. You really can't draw any kind of parallels to, is there another program that's like it? Are these kids really achieving? Just looking at that small pool of testers in and of itself makes those numbers kind of a little bit dicey to figure. And they now recognize that, and that is now part of the law. Fewer than 100 valid test scores are considered kind of irrelevant by CDA, and they go, you've got to kind of look at other factors. And they've given us the leeway to show other methods of showing that our children are growing. And that's why our board has put into place this requirement that our students use the Ed Performance System twice a year. Ed Performance is a program, an online program developed by the Scantron Corporation, and it allows our students to go in and do assessments online, and then that information goes into this huge, massive computerized brain somewhere out there that tosses back information that is very detailed. Which particular standards have the children met? Which standards are they having trouble with? And then that helps us to kind of identify and to help our families, like Allison and Beth, kind of make their home teaching meet those particular areas of need for the student. But having said that, Jane, to be perfectly honest with you, Valley Oak test scores are probably going to always be all over the map. It's a small group of kids. We're working with essentially, right now we have 73 students. So we have 73 different educational plans. Every student is working on academics that are geared specifically to them. They start with the grade level expectations or the Common Core standards that we have now, but then our charter says not all kids are right there. You might have a first grader who's reading at third grade level. You might have a first grader who still doesn't understand their alphabet. Valley Oak is about supporting each of those children, each of those families in making progress, but at their own rate. So our numbers, I don't ever expect us to have, solid 900s across the board that just stay there for forever. What I do expect is that we will continue to come in with solid figures that are not of concern to our friends at the Department of Education. We have never fallen below the low 70s or 700s. We've been as high as 805 in the past. And we kind of go, it's 740, now it's 760, now it's 732, now it's 786. And I honestly expect that's what's going to happen. The good thing for us is that the educational community, most of the Department of Education, recognizes that that doesn't mean that we're not succeeding, that these children are not growing. They recognize the particular concerns and issues that we have with our small community, with the fact that our students tend to kind of come and go a little bit more than in a traditional program. A family might homeschool for a year. They might homeschool for 3 months. They might homeschool for forever. You just don't know. And so our numbers are always moving around. Our population is always moving. So our focus is on providing our families with the tools to address the standards. So we have workshops that we offer in math and reading and writing. We offer those all the time. Every year we have a couple of workshops that we offer. That's our way of reaching out to our community who might not be focusing on those particular standards and help them to make that growth. Our teachers work very closely with our families based on the assessments that we receive from Ed Performance to help them identify areas where kids really need some more support. And we just basically do everything that we can as a community to help our families have a positive educational experience. And kind of for us, I know it's not that we the real world folks, but for us, those scores are kind of secondary. Our focus is...
We want it to be that way in the real world.
I know, and someday when the world is a wonderful place, I think it really will be. Because for me, and I taught for Ojai Unified, I was a teacher at Topa and at Matilahat before.
And taught my children.
Graham was one of my students, that is correct. And I loved it. It was a great experience for me. But the focus, the emphasis on tests that are required of public schools now is not something that I enjoyed. It's not something my colleagues enjoyed. It's not something that any of us felt was really in the best interest of our students, but it was something that we had to do. At Valley Oak, we're given a little more leeway to kind of move back from that a little bit and say, yes, we want our children to be aware of what other children in their grade level are learning. We want them to grow and succeed, but we want them to do it because it's an intrinsic goal for them and it's authentic learning. We don't do a whole lot of test prep at Valley Oak. Not to say that it's not available to our families. We have lots of opportunities for them, but we don't push it. We don't practice the test. We don't focus on exactly what's going to be on the test. We focus on the whole education of the whole child, and we have faith that in doing that, the kids are going to grow and they're going to progress. And so far, we've found that that is true.
Good. And one other question. You were talking about the, you provide sort of curriculum materials for parents to, and it said, I circled it somewhere, but I don't remember what page, that it was, I think it said approved or...
Probably standards-based, maybe.
Yeah, so the parents get to choose I assume that there's different different children are attracted to different...
Absolutely.
So that there's just, they kind of...
Well,
lots of different choices.
Our program says, look, we're going to tell you what your standards are for your child's education. We're going to make sure you know them. You're going to talk to us about your child's learning styles. Are they a kinetic learner? Do they need to be wiggling to learn? Are they an auditory learner? Do they need to have a quiet room where they can listen to you? We help them identify those things, and then working with the parent who, honestly, the parent's the person who knows their child better than any of us do, no matter how many years they've been in our classroom. So the parent tells us, well, these are the things that help my child to learn. And then we help them to select a curriculum that supports that. Our curriculum might be from, well, maybe a kindergarten student, where mostly it should be hands-on. I mean, everybody agrees that developmentally, a kindergarten student shouldn't be sitting there looking at a book all day. They should be touching things, moving things, manipulating things. So for some of our kindergartners, a big one right now is called Moving Beyond the Page, which is what we call a boxed curriculum. So the thing shows up as this giant box, you open it up, it's got all kinds of manipulatives, it's got all kinds of information for the parent to work with, it's got, you know, lesson plans, all kinds of fun stuff, and the parent just starts working their way through that. That's kind of that end of things. A kindergarten student can do that. Now that we are moving towards providing a more, I don't want to say socially acceptable because that's not good, but a more perhaps acceptable kind of curriculum for our older students. Once we added grades 11 and 12 and went to developing a diploma program, once we went for the WASC accreditation, there was a real eye-opening in the community that students who are going to choose that as an option, and I want to stress that it is a choice. They don't have to do that at Valley Oak. They can choose to do something completely different in high school. But if they choose that it's really important that they're following curriculum that has already been kind of time-tested, that is following the standards, that is supporting the kinds of education that is going in a more traditional environment, because obviously our WASC accreditation says a student can come to Valley Oak and do 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, and they should be able to transfer to Nordhouse, no problem, because they're doing the same level of work. So our families are going to be choosing all those ranges, from this end all the way to here. Some of them are, you know, all over the place. We even have people who are called unschoolers, who will scare you to death. These are people who don't follow a curriculum at all. They simply say, you know what, my child learns best just by kind of being connected with life in general. And so, you know, we read books together and we experience things together, and when they show interest in a particular subject, we delve into with a little more depth. It's kind of a scary way to educate a kid, but I need you to know that I know 2 kids personally who were homeschooled as unschoolers who are now in colleges. So just because it's different doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's certainly more challenging. More challenging for our supervising teachers, because they're the ones who have to look at the stuff that comes in from these families and figure out how, well, what exactly is that there? What does that mean? So yeah, different kinds of curriculum, different kinds of folks, all over the map.
Why don't we come back to Linda?
Okay,
Yeah.
You talk about students are active participants in the design of their own individual learning plan. How old are they when they start doing that? What approximate grade level would you say?
From kindergarten on. From the day they walk through school, they are involved in that process. The intake process for our families is once they've done a site visit, which is required at our school, because it is very different. We don't want people showing up and saying, oh yeah, sign my kid up, and then thinking that it's something different than what it is. So we're very careful about making sure people are very clear on what's involved in the program. And then once they have enrolled, they meet with their supervising teacher. Each student has one of our credentialed staff members that they're assigned to. They meet with them, generally speaking, within the first 2 days after they've signed paperwork. And the whole family meets, or whatever the parent grouping is, and they talk about things like, what is your child's learning style? What are your child's interests? What are your goals for the year? What are your learning objectives? What is it that you want to accomplish? And the children, as much as they can be, are part of that process as well. Now, obviously, with any age group of child, in fact, I had 2 site visits today at the same time, both kindergartners for next year. One of the little girls could have cared less what was going on and was like off partying and doing stuff with toys. And the other little girl sat at the desk and asked me questions. So it kind of depends on the student. But certainly by the time they're Nathan's age, it's important to us that young people don't see education as something that happens to them, something that is visited upon them, but more that it's an opportunity for them to continue the growth that they start when they enter the world. You know, a young child they get frustrated, but they never give up because they want to learn. They have a deep-seated internal need to learn. And sometimes we end up kind of beating it out of them. If we put them in settings where they're constantly told, well, no, you can't do that right now because we're focusing on this right now, or time to put that stuff away because we're doing this other thing right now, or yeah, I know you like to read that book, but we're doing math. So in our program, we try really hard to allow our students to have as much input as possible on their own educational program. That doesn't mean you always get to pick and choose. You know, sometimes the rest of us have to come in and be, you know, well, yeah, it would be nice if you could learn everything you want to learn by surfing every day, but maybe we're going to have to introduce a few other things there. But I wouldn't say that there really is an age level, Linda. Certainly by high school, middle school and high school, they're definitely very involved in that process.
And then one of the WAS recommendations, sort of piggybacking on Jane's question about developing a school-wide assessment process, and you say in your summary here, you say the process is in development and will be fully implemented in the 2016-17 school year. Will we be able to see that assessment instrument that you guys designed? I mean,
yes, absolutely. Well, because we'll be giving an annual report to the board in any event, so that would certainly, that's an area that we've talked about a great deal, about making sure that you get all that information. At this point, our initial phase of that process is focused primarily on ed performance, because it does allow us to target each individual student rather than a grade level of students, and because we are requiring by our board action that students do it within the first 2 months of school, and again within the last 2 months of school, we do have the kind of this over time longitudinal study that will really help us, we think. But that's not the only thing we intend to do. It's just kind of the first step.
Okay, and then since you now have 11th and 12th graders, how many of those, what's the number for your 11th and 12th graders?
Oh, Ms. Driggers, I will defer to you. Do you know what our 9th through 12th grade group is right now?
I'd say 10 or 12.
In our 11th and 12th graders?
More like 25.
25.
Yeah.
26
Nancy works primarily with our high school students. We kind of have, because our numbers have switched around a little bit, we've kind of switched our supervising teachers into vague groupings. So Kara does our primary students primarily K-4, and then Bryce Pace does our 5th through 8th grade, and Nancy takes care of our 9th through 12th graders. And she has 24 students on her roster.
And 9 to 12, yeah. And I think, 9 to 12. Then 11 to 12, we're at about what?
I think about 10.
About
Yeah.
10.
Okay. So it worked. It was a good thing.
It was a good thing, and you know, it's really been an eye-opener for us. When we made that choice, and for those of you who are new to the board, some of you who've been here before know that prior to adding 11 and 12, we just didn't have that. We had what we called our Chesapeake track. So every student who came to our school, in the 8th grade, we looked at them and we went, so I had this workshop called Beyond VOC that I do every year. Are you planning on taking the Chesapeake exam, and do you have a plan for your life? Or are you going to go on and do traditional high school? And kids had to make a choice right then. Because if they were going to do a traditional high school program and try to get that traditional 220, 230, however many credits it is, A through G, certified, let's go to Yale diploma, our program's not for them. And we needed to move them on, and we did. We had kids who moved on to Nordhoff, we had kids who went to El Camino School, we had kids go all over the place. And when we decided, you know, we really should give our kids another option and moved to add grades 11, 12, and went for the Roscoe accreditation. In my mind, I thought it was going to be primarily kids who were already in our program who made the decision to go with that diploma track. And we're not really seeing that as much as we're seeing kids who are coming in from outside of the school to a larger extent than we expected and saying, A through G isn't for me. I'm not going to go straight from high school to a four-year university. I already know that. I already know I'm going to spend 2 years at a junior college, and I'm struggling to meet these requirements, and I'm becoming disheartened, or there's too much drama, or all the other fun-filled, exciting things that, as you know very well, happen in a high school setting. So we've got, we've got some of each now. We've got a lot of kids who are already in our program who have decided, well, yeah, the diploma, maybe I will go for that. But we probably have just as many of the kids who are already homeschooling who have said, you know what, I want to do the Chesapeake. I'm going to finish the Chesapeake. I'm going to go to junior college. That's what I'm going to do.
How many kids start with, do you have any kids yet that have graduated from Valley Oak that have been in the program for at least 6, at least since like middle school or younger?
Yes, we actually, we have a couple of students. Well, we have a couple who graduated with the Chesapeake, and we have a couple who graduated with the VOC diploma, which, in case you're not aware, is a state mandated diploma. So it's really, the state only requires 13 core subjects of high schoolers in order to get a high school diploma. All of the other fun stuff that we have in there is built in to particular school's program or district's program based on what that school has decided is important to them. Traditionally, most high schools are somewhere in the 220 range. So from 130 to 220 is a pretty big chunk of classes. And primarily those classes are to satisfy the A through G requirements of a CSU or a UC school.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kevin?
Like Michael, I kind of had planned my big conversation next time.
And that's actually what I was expecting, but I've been doing this for 12 years now, so I can actually kind of stand up here and sleep and probably answer your questions. I live Valley Oak.
Well, thanks. Hopefully we can't do the same.
Oh, that would not be good. Actually, it's not something to aim for thing. I have to give you
That's
some
fine.
good. Well, I look forward to seeing you then in March. That'll be great. We'll have a few more families here, so hopefully we'll get right up and be able to get them all out at home so they can do their work records. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you for being here, and thanks for everybody attending.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, troops.
All right, agenda item 7.11.
I think this is pretty straightforward. There's a wonderful young teacher in our preschool, pre-kindergarten, in or transitional kindergarten at Topa, and we would like to we'd like to help her help herself to become a fully certified teacher. That's what this is all about.
So can we have a motion to approve
So
the
moved.
application?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. All right, on to 7.3.1.
Okay.
Minor votes.
Marilyn is hopped up, ready to go. Of course, Marilyn, you know Dawn, of course, Dawn Damiano's principal of Miners Oak School, and Marilyn Smith, who in this particular context is actually both the director or coordinator of elementary curriculum and also our special projects director. Most of this, I think, also stands on its own. I don't need to make particular comments to expand upon what's written, except to simply say that, as I have in the materials that you received for tonight, that this year 5 of program improvement is a direct outgrowth of the continuing involvement of California with No Child Left Behind, and it is now actually a year after, really, No Child Left Behind ended, but it didn't end. It's still here. And so schools literally all over the nation, tens of thousands of schools, I can't give you a number, tens of thousands of schools are in year 5, year 4, down to year 1, on to year 10. I mean, there's some that are truly in double digits. And it is just, this particular chart and all the work that is being done now is related to that, and also related to our recent visit from our federal program overseers. So I'll let Marilyn sort of bring it all together for you, and Dawn, of course, can answer any questions that pertain to Miners Oaks in particular.
Okay. This is, remember the last board meeting, I don't think Jane was here, but the last board meeting, I said we will have several board meetings where we have to discuss things that came up during the FPM review. So this was one of them. It all has to do with No Child Left Behind, as Hank alluded to. And tonight, it's specifically about program improvement. And for those of you who may or may not know, a school interest program improvement when they don't make AYP at yearly progress, adequate yearly progress, for 2 years in a row. So I have to say, in the county, I went and just researched how many schools are in program improvement just in our county. We have 20 districts in our county. And of all schools that are Title I, you can only be in program improvement if you're in Title I. So of all schools in Title I, only 5 in the entire county are not in program improvement. And those 5 schools have only become a Title I school in the last 1 or 2 years. Thus. And then in the county, 57 schools are in year 5. I didn't go bother.
I would say, or more, because they're
I didn't bother counting all the 5+.
there are 5 pluses.
So, Miners Oaks and Matilaha are both in year 5, but all of us are frozen in whatever year we are. So, Miramani is year 1, Nordhoff is year 4, Matilaha and Miners Oaks are year 5, and Topatopa is year 3. They would have been year 4, but they got something called Safe Harbor, which meant they decreased the number of people who were not proficient one year. So all of our Title I schools are in program improvement. That just kind of gives you some context.
And if I could clarify, because there was no testing, it's correct that there was no way to redeem ourselves from any of this.
That's correct. That's why we're frozen. So everybody is frozen wherever we were. So there's no way to exit program improvement, which means 2 years of making AYP. We didn't have AYP. But Nordhoff is the only exception because their AYP is based on their CASI. So they did advance a year. So they went from year 3 to year 4. It's all very cumbersome. It's the federal government, so it's very cumbersome. So that gives you a little context with what you're going to hear tonight about the plan at Miners Oaks.
Okay. So because we are year 5 of program improvement and we're not alone, we had to come up with an alternative governance plan. So we created a leadership committee at our school. It consists of Danon Plott, who teaches our 4-5 combo. Janice Duncan teaches the 3-4 combo. Susie Thatcher, who has the special day class, and then I'm on the committee as well. And we will meet monthly or more often if needed. And there's 3 specific areas that we'll always address. One is professional development. The next is data. And the third area is intervention and prevention. So the leadership team met already last month and decided that they wanted to read the most recent revision of the Framework for Understanding Poverty. I'm sure you may have seen it. And it's by Ruby Payne. And every staff member will get the book. And they're getting a care package with it, chocolates, highlighters. And Mrs. Plott wanted to include the candy Smarties because she feels we're all Smarties in a good way. So they're all going to get the book, and then we're going to generate activities and conversations that are based on the book by Ruby Payne. And that'll be our professional development we do with the whole staff. For the rest of this school year and even next year, the leadership committee will be given a portion of every monthly staff meeting, and they're going to devote that to addressing areas in the 3 I mentioned, the professional development, data, and then intervention and prevention. So that's our alternative governance.
What about the last of the 3 then is prevention and intervention?
Prevention and intervention.
A little bit about that, what would that look like?
Looking at our intervention programs, or can we prevent something? Is a student struggling? What can we do to help them? Things like that. It ties into data also. Yeah.
Because I had circled that too, that it says preventions and interventions, including strategies to prevent student failure. So probably not anything that you weren't already doing, right?
You're right.
So so last month we were looking at the pyramid, right? Are we talking sort of our RTI-ish here? How are you intervening with students? That's the question. What are you doing in 2014-15 in terms of intervening with students who have issues that we might not have been doing before? And so you have an initiative now that you're creating. So if I'm a student or a family that is having some struggles, not special education,
Right.
What might be an example of what that student would experience that we have not done before?
Well, we may involve more of our staff members to look at that student because we're using this committee and then we're using our whole staff. So we might look at data and instead of having a conversation just with the grade level, maybe it's expanded to all of the teachers there and they may have another perspective, say, hey, have you tried this? Or I had the student before 3 years ago, this is something that might be successful. So just sharing information across a broader spectrum might be a way that we are able to look at them.
Also to time allocation, maybe giving, instead of 45 minutes, have more like an hour. So we have to look at time allocation, how things are paced, curriculum, of course, which is in flux.
You know, that made me think of the tutorial that they do at Matillaha for some of the struggling students, and I got your paw print yesterday that was talking about the Rosetta Stone.
Right.
So the school's offering Rosetta Stone for parents who want to learn English, and at the same time, there's like a homework club in another room, I gather.
They're separate things, but.
Not offered at the same time?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Rosetta
Because I thought
Stone-
that would be interesting as a strategy to sort of recommend that maybe these struggling students come to that homework club. I don't
It's
know, but-
we call it a West Side thing just because Miramani and Miners Oaks are together on it. So the Rosetta Stone classes are going to be offered to the parents. And then the homework club is more right after school to help the kids with their homework. And then the parents go to the evening class.
How is the attendance with the parents? Is that?
It's just started.
It's just
So
started.
I wouldn't be able to answer that yet.
Okay. I just have to say, I feel really distressed that there's the implication that you guys aren't doing everything that you absolutely can do, because I know that you are doing everything. And the whole, it just makes me really furious. I don't know how else to explain it other than, but yeah, it's very frustrating.
Well,
And I know you must be frustrated too.
This alternative governance, we're just making a great thing out of it by
Yeah.
doing the professional development and the things we're going to do. We're just going to.
Do you ever have high school kids that want to volunteer to tutor the kids, the students? I'm just curious.
We've had the high school come. It's nice because Miners Oaks is just across the
It's right
meadow,
there,
so you don't need a ride so much as you can walk. And I know that Mrs. Duncan's class meets Mr. Lapine's class, and they're doing their science and environmental studies together, so that's a great way to get the high school students, as mentors. I love to see the big high school kids with little kids, working together and looking at birds and documenting things in a journal. So the high school has been helpful to us, and we have had tutors before.
Thank you. Thanks for all your hard work.
Does anyone, maybe this is more of a Hank question, does the Title I program audit in some way? I mean, how do they, for example, I assume Hank in his notes to us referenced that there were various draconian choices, including give your school to the state,
Yes.
close down,
Right.
run as fast as you can, But I assume that this is being done under the last category, which is just major restructuring?
Yeah.
Yeah, the five options, if you will,
Right.
are under year 4. Well, they're in various places on this chart, but the 5 that are most recent, that from which we could choose, right, draconian is the right word. And the great news is, I have to say, there are articles in newspapers in other districts where the parents have pushed for one of those draconian efforts and would not have allowed the school to change its governance, change the kind of things that Miners Oaks is doing completely on its own, 100% with my support. And so it's not a given that the district would follow the path that we're following. I don't know, Marilyn, you go to Title I meetings. I mean, I would bet the majority do this, but I know some don't.
Right. I don't know the percent, but I would say the majority do that last bullet,
The one we're doing,
restructuring.
right.
And is there guidance from the
In your-
government?
Yeah, in answer to your question about an audit, yes. That's what the FPM was in December. So Federal Program Monitoring. So they sent 2 reviewers out to monitor any federal programs that we had, and to see that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, spending it on what you're supposed to be spending it. And that's what these different findings are that we're.
That we're responding to?
One of which
Correct.
is
One is, yeah, the bylaws.
The policies, right, yeah.
Is there, I was just going to say, is there a list?
Oh, yeah. We have a
That's
list.
public?
Be happy to make it public. Marilyn?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I'll send it to Hank.
Yeah, I'll send it to you on Friday.
It's a notice of findings, NOF, notice of findings, and we had out of 33 instruments for Title I, which is called Compensatory Education, CE. There were 33 instruments. I think we uploaded 258 documents or something. And we had 6 findings. So 6 of 33 we needed to resolve. The second area was English learner. And there are 20 instruments, and we had 9 findings. And
What's an instrument?
well, it will be something like, well, you'll see it when I send it to you, but it'll say something like, school site council needs to have parity between parents and school staff. That's one instrument.
And then if we
If that
pass
didn't
that
occur,
test,
yeah,
we're good, and
yes.
if not, then they
If not,
flag
we
it.
have to resolve
It's
it.
like criteria. It's
Got
a
it.
criteria.
Yeah, it's a criterion.
Got it.
Compliance.
And then we had a third area in, that they were reviewing, and it was uniform complaint procedures.
Right, we're dealing with that.
And you're dealing with that, the Williams
Right.
wasn't quite right. Maybe it said student instead of pupil. It's pretty detailed.
Right.
And Marilyn, you are the Title I director?
I am,
Well, maybe we could just post that too, somewhere.
that I'm the Title I director.
No, the findings that Jane had referred to, the findings.
Oh, the findings.
Yeah.
Well, and it also goes back to, I was just looking at one of these recommendations from them is to extend the school day, which is one of those things that on my campaign, I was talking about this sort of mentoring program, and I've been researching, a lot across the country where they're doing that. I'm from St. Louis, talking to a program that I know a teacher at in St. Louis who's doing that, extending the day. And I'm not talking about funds, I know there's no funds, but that might be
Except, you want to be very careful that you don't get into something that's a negotiated item.
Which it would be.
So there's a lot of balancing.
Right.
Well, I think the upside of this is we get to hear what you're doing at Miners Oaks, and I get to catch up a little bit, so that's wonderful. Are there any other questions or comments?
Will we be having these sort of presentations then also from Nordoff and? you said there's
No, this is-
several-
No, the
Go ahead, explain
two, federal program monitoring comes around every 4 years, and we happen to be in cycle A, Ventura County. And then 7 or 8 districts are chosen at random to have an FPM, and we were one of the districts. And so usually, every 4 years, you'll have an on-site visit. So this year, the on-site visit was Matilaha and Miners Oaks. I fully expect we'll have an online audit in 2 years. You can have an online every after the on-site. I fully expect we'll have an online in 2 years, and probably Nordoff and Totopa. That's my guess.
To clarify though, so the reason you're here is because the FPM basically said that you needed to report to the school board?
Yes, and it needed to be a formal restructuring plan that is approved by the school board.
And we're being asked to approve that plan.
Right, but along the lines of what Jane said, for the other schools that are also in this Title I, or also in the PI,
Program improvement.
do we need to think that they may need to
They'll
also make
have
these
to, too.
presentations?
Correct.
So we'll be hearing from them?
Not this year.
Okay, not this year, got
That's
it.
that online thing, Mike. And, well, I'll just.
But not Matilaha, you said they visited Matilaha, they're
Okay.
not, because they're not.
Matilaha, this is
That's
very
the question.
interesting. Matilaha is just like Miners Oaks. They started in 2008, 9, I think it was, in program improvement. The auditor, Bill, well, some of you weren't on the board, but at the beginning of this year, Bill talked a little bit about his leadership council, and it's mostly his department chairs and a few other teachers, and he wanted to pay for them out of Common Core. And so the auditor read his proposal and said, oh, that's your restructuring. Well, great.
We knew that.
And so they accepted it, and then they wanted the board minutes that approved the Common Core funding. Well, yes, we approved the Common Core funding. So It was just a strange occurrence, really a strange occurrence. So, there you have it.
I guess what I'm getting at is, I mean, did we learn through this FPM that technically, if they showed up at TOPA, they would say, oh, well, TOPA hasn't made that presentation to the board, and are we just waiting for them to tell us to do that, even though we're supposed to do it, or
No.
they're not even supposed to do it?
They won't just show up.
Okay.
No, and TOPA knows they're in year 3 and that they need to be looking when they go to year 4, whenever we have tests, that they'll need to start thinking about their plan, and by year 5, they need to implement their restructuring.
Okay.
And the last thing I would say is it may be, I'm not holding my breath on this one, but it may be that when there's some confluence of the Smarter Balance testing and the California Department of Education and the powers that be, they may come up with a different set of criteria that would determine whether or not you move from year 3 to year 4 or 4 to 5. It shouldn't be automatic, even if No Child Left Behind is still around. Right, so, and I'm not expecting No Child Left Behind to be reauthorized, I'm not expecting it to be thrown out. I think it's just going to be, but I'm holding out some hope that we will have a brighter future when it comes to analyzing test scores at the state level.
Well, do you think, if they said that we want 100% by, I don't remember the year.
2014.
2014.
They did that
And then-
12 years ago.
Yeah, but so now what?
Then everybody's
frozen.
in,
That's why we're all in program.
everybody's in program, that's what I'm trying to
I
say.
know, but they're not, is there any talk about, all
No,
right, that's
no,
ridiculous,
no.
let's get rid of
That's why we need a smarter, balanced California Board of Education.
No. There's no talk about it. They're not even to the point yet where we have a sense of what the Smarter Balance estimate would be, right? Except we should be getting pretty close to that mid-year, some type of hint, right? Aren't we getting close to the mid-year sort of look at what Smarter Balance might be?
Oh, we do have interim assessments we
Yes.
can look at.
Okay.
And we will have practice tests we're going to look at. In fact, when you called me this morning, I was at a Smarter Balance meeting.
Oh, there you go.
And parents will have the results, but the results, and I think, Linda, you asked about the
In the
results.
spring.
Well, I
How long
don't think
it will
we'll have them in the spring.
No, from the tests that are upcoming yet.
The upcoming tests, see, our window doesn't close until June 9th.
Right, so, well, that's still the spring. So, they'll get them later, like we got them.
4 to 6 weeks
Oh, that's
after
faster,
June 9th.
that's faster than the old state testing.
That's what I heard at Curriculum Council last
Well,
week.
I'll believe when I see it. Okay.
Great, so I thank you very much for the report and
We
the
need
work.
approval.
Right.
No, he knows that. He knows that. He knows.
I was trying to do a
I
smooth,
don't want to leave till we get that.
There you go.
I'm trying to move to that topic smoothly. In any case, can we,
I
Move to approve.
Move to approve the restructuring plan for my museum.
and a second? Second. Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous
Thank you.
approval? Thank you.
Hey, good job, good job.
Good job.
All right,
I'll be
on-
back next month.
Yeah, right, yeah, right.
It's always a pleasure.
I think we finally phased out poor Angie Janasic as well.
Well,
I think.
she was next, I think Danny went to get her.
Yeah,
So,
I just said try to grab her.
yeah.
Great, yeah. And
I want-
is there, we
I want-
can
I want
talk
to
about
thank her.
7.3.
I'll talk for a while before she gets here, let's see. All right, so, I won't talk more than I promise. So the instructional calendar is here, I've written to you at length about how it was constructed. Hopefully Angie will be back so we can thank her for not only working with Danny and me on this one, but for 20 years, that's unbelievable, 20 years of working on calendars, which is, I've never known anybody with that kind of stick-to-itiveness on any issue of this type. So, good news, the calendar returns, did you get her?
She did not want to speak to it. She would want to.
Oh, okay, then she can see the video.
She said,
She can see the-
she's for the calendar, and that's what we.
Well, I knew that because we worked on it, okay. Anyhow, okay, so, thank you, Angie, even though you're not coming back. So, it returns 180 instructional days, I wish we could take credit for, initiating that on our own, but as Danny noted here, pursuant to state law. That's the good news. Bad news is that we still have built in here, as you can see, the possibility of 1 or 2 furlough days, which would be then for the 6th year. 7th furlough days. So I'm hoping that, yeah, I know, Martha, I know. I'm hoping that won't occur. I've spoken to that numerous times. Thank you, Ken, for your comments, because it's sort of related to that. Now, so we're asking you to adopt this calendar, which mirrors this year's almost entirely, but has a later end date because we have 3 more days of school, maybe 4 or 5. And I can talk about the future of calendars at another time, but I've written to you that I think there are a lot of different ways of doing calendars. I've been, on committees, chaired committees, and I think there are some options that we should look at that will enhance potentially upcoming years 16, 17, and on. The only thing that's not on this calendar, and I told you I was going to go to a meeting today at the high school, but never quite made it over there because we were working on things together, but I know what happened. There is a strong, almost unanimous support among the leadership, department chairs, and other people like that at the high school to end the first semester at winter break.
Yes, I see that. That's
Right, okay.
wonderful.
So
That makes so much
that
sense.
is, we put it in here. I just want to let you know that it was overwhelming. Now, what we still have to work on, okay, yeah. End of
Quarter
first
1 and 3.
Quarter 1 and 3, they weren't quite ready to say that yet, but, we can sort of expect that it'll be in October
And March.
And March, okay, so we'll fill those in. But tonight I'm looking for your approval of this calendar with all the details, beginning on August 24th for staff, 25th for students, ending on June 16th graduation, which means we end on June 15th. And we retain the breaks that have been historic for the district, but those are part of the conversation that I'd like to have. I'm not portending change, I'm just saying we're going to talk about it. And that's it. And Danny, thank you for your great work all these years on the calendar. That's yet another item I'll have to figure out. I'll figure out who's going to do that one.
I didn't put that on my list of duties. I better add
Actually,
that.
that one I can do.
I forgot that one.
That one I can do, except one year, I got to tell you, in one of my previous districts, I counted wrong. And I didn't have the right number of days, and I had to say, oops, we need another day. So I promise I will count.
I think we need a whole year.
Transition from Danny?
Exactly.
I know. Well, their phones work down in Encinitas, we can call them.
I said
We
anytime.
might do some.
Skype.
I was about to say, we might do some Skype. Okay, that's enough. That's right.
I do want to just share that my feeling when I first looked at this calendar was June 15th is an awful late day to get out as far as a parent. But Hank and I talked about it, and the fact that Labor Day is September 7th, which is the latest it can be.
Right.
So in order to start a week earlier, if you don't want to end in late June, then you're starting earlier in August.
3 weeks before Labor Day.
And that would be 3 weeks before Labor Day, which was a little.
And just so you know, we typically, prior to the fiscal crisis, the state fiscal crisis, we always had a 2-year calendar adoption. So we always had 2 years in advance, parents would know, but during this crisis and during the furlough days, we were unable to do that because we weren't sure where days were going to be and if we were going to bring them back. So we talked about going back now to a 2-year adoption cycle, so people are aware. So if we do want to change beginning and end dates, the parents have well in advance this information.
Well, and I know that the teachers don't like a huge, long summer in terms of student learning. So parents, would love 3 months, but the teachers are saying the longer your break is, the harder it is to get back to where you were when the students left. So I understand that's countrywide.
Yeah. No, they're.
In the United States, teachers are saying. Nationally, teachers are saying, that student learning is here in June or whenever your school day leaves, and then when you come back in September, it's dropped. That's just the natural, they've forgotten some of the things they've learned. So nationally, they're talking about making summers shorter so that there's less of a drop. But I know parents don't like that. Because I always look at that week in February too. How many school districts are taking a whole week for presidents?
That'll be part of what we'll be looking at in the committee.
Yeah, I think continuing the discussion will be good. I think I've forgotten some of the things I learned at the beginning of the meeting.
Anyway, I recommend this for approval.
Do we have a motion to approve the calendar for the coming year? Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Unanimous?
So excited they're actually ending the winter break. It's fabulous.
And it's exciting that we're able to return those furlough days.
Yes.
And hope to be able to get them all back. Moving to item 7.3.3, African American History Month. Do we have a motion to approve?
I will motion to approve.
Thank you. In a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Moving on to...
Before we move
Yes.
on, I just have a question of Hank.
Sure.
Are there any special activities planned for,
You know, I ask this every year, and the answer is absolutely yes, okay? They vary by age, by school, obviously by sophistication, but I've been really pleased over the years with what our people do. How about this? I will accumulate
I'd love to,
the various things that are done, and at the end of the month, I'll let you know.
that'd be great.
How about that, okay?
Thank you.
That's where that calendar would come in.
And I think it's worth noting
Well, it might get on there, it might not, but okay.
that there were some excellent student essays at the Martin Luther King Jr.
There were.
Day ceremony,
So fun, yeah.
and maybe those can be included in the materials.
Yeah, in fact, Ricky Horn wrote to us about that, and I'll go see if I can find them.
Fantastic.
And again, Thane reminded me, what happened to all of that artwork that was in the arcade? Some of that stuff was really good.
It's returned to the students.
I assume so.
Photos of it?
Well, how about, at either March 11th, well, March 11th next week. So I will get you either pictures of
That'd
it
be
or
great.
here, physically here. Okay, that's good, I like that.
Great. On to 7.5.1. This is our opportunity to fix some of the issues with the federal audit.
Well, I would just say, okay, so this document sort of looks like it did a month ago, but it really doesn't, because Danny spent a lot of time on this. And if you could follow hopefully you can follow the guide, the acronyms. And for three of you haven't seen this before, but for Thane and Linda, they've seen this a lot. And you're going to be seeing a lot more of this, because we have lots of policies.
I'm very, very behind on board policies.
No, you don't have to explain.
But I am.
But anyway, thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. And this is following what Ruby used to do, the board policies, and resigned that work. And
So
so
we are looking for someone to do it.
Yes.
Seriously. And I'm
Yes.
very-
So I followed his legend, so two of you are used to seeing the legend, and I used the same CSBA documents with the boxes, giving you the history and the education code or legal information that you need to understand each paragraph. And then noted for you whether it was in our current policy or whether it was, just some few extra changes, but inherently in there, and then here are the brand new ones. And it's okay, because it's mandated.
Are there any comments to this document?
I just have one question.
Sure.
At the top 3 of 37, or?
On 12 of 37, page 12 of 37. The fourth paragraph down, it says the superintendent or designee shall ensure that employees designated to investigate complaints receive training. Do we do this? I mean, I know this is a new thing, but we're doing this now?
Well, actually, it's interesting you raise that, because talking about Jim Berube, he had a couple of different tasks when I came. He was our community relations person. He was good at it, but I wasn't quite sure what that was. Second, he investigated complaints. Third, he was available for just sort of special projects. And then we reorganized and cut administration, and then he transited over to policies only. I basically am this person, okay? So it's not, so there is no designee. Okay. Except if I feel, I might ask Marilyn, for example, if I feel that I might have a bias, or I might have a conflict of interest somehow, I can't tell you exactly what it is, but, that's not really true. If I'm involved with, say, a teacher who is complaining about a principal, that can happen. Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm the supervisor of that principal, I don't want to be the person who's going to investigate the complaint, so I'll find somebody else.
Or if there's a serious matter, then I call in an outside
Probably you would do
investigator.
that. You know about that?
Yeah.
Okay. But generally, I would be the person And if I designate someone, I guess I would just have to say training. The training would be working with me.
Well, I just was thinking of the union representatives, or, because maybe that would be the first person that someone might complain to. I'm hoping that they get this information too.
Well, contract issues would be different.
Okay.
Any contract issues, we have the separate negotiations and grievance process outlined in our contract. So that's an area that would go to. This is for complaints against employees of the district, or a procedure or process or a student thing that happened outside the negotiating process or the contract.
To be like your unlawful harassment, discrimination kind of stuff.
And then on page 14 of 37, the top paragraph says the 15% or more of students enrolled speak a single primary language other than English, the district's policy, regulation forms, et cetera, in that language. So we do that.
We have Spanish versions,
Okay,
yes.
perfect. Those are my only two questions.
My only comments, when I first looked at it, I interacted with Hank over I was like probably overly concerned with periods and things, and I realized that this comes into it is in a kind of a different context normally than maybe
That's why I
we're
wanted
seeing
you
it
to
here.
see this,
So I don't have an issue with that. Kind of along the lines of what Linda was just asking, though. This is really dense, and it's full of
my gosh.
requirements.
You have no idea.
And my concern
Just
is
wait.
who, just like other issues where we have potential legal exposure for failing to follow just in line and verse every single obligation. Boy, this is a lot, and how do we make sure?
Okay, all right, here's some truths, okay? The truth is that a lot of hard work preceded my coming here in 2009 to catch up on policies. I would say, by that I mean the CSBA-driven policy denseness, okay, that we receive, 3 times a year or something like that from CSBA?
When we initially, from initial conversion.
Right, and we pay for that service, and without that, we'd never even come close to getting things right. Okay, so for 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, we're pretty well caught up. We just got so much work to do in 13 into 14. We need to catch up with 13, 14. So that's sort of the timetable. The reality, though, that you're asking about, and I've been very honest about this, I would say that I have never been in a district in any state where if someone came in and said, are you doing everything in these board policies that says you shall do it? I have never been in a district where the answer would have been yes, okay? And so I'm telling you that part of my job is to decide which of these things are really important, and therefore I'm going to hold people's feet to the fire and write memos and send out other reminders. And other things, honestly, are advisory, okay? And if something happens and I made a mistake, then it's on me, okay? But there's absolutely no way, your point is perfect, there's no way, even in this one little section here, compared to this, we can't do everything. It's impossible. You can't. So we do our best. We don't have, we don't have much staff, but we do our best to comply where compliance is crucial, where it comes to the rights of students, the rights of staff, the rights of parents, the rights of them. I'd say we're pretty close to 100% compliance. Where it comes to, you should really, example, the superintendent shall form a committee to look at this. No. I'm sorry, we'd be committed to death. Okay, because Sacramento decided that we need to do it. They didn't ask me. So, we do our best, but I'm sure you've all been in organizations. I bet if I asked Mike, that I bet you even at Ventura County Community College District, all of these has all of these thousands of employees and phalanx of administrative staff. I'll bet you they don't even do everything.
No, we're perfect.
Yeah, I know.
Now that we are being broadcast,
We're on television, I'm telling you.
But I want to say, so that what your comment doesn't sound glib.
It's not glib.
You're referring to, we are talking about literally, 37 pages of incredibly dense, you shall, that would, I guess the idea, like a lawyer, is if you're confronted with a situation, you kind of go to the statute and you try and find all the applicable parts. I have to say, when I read it, I found things that seemed to overlap.
Probably.
They seem to be the same kind of potential complaint with 2 different things you're supposed to do. So I just have to say, I feel your pain.
Well, no kidding. I mean, and this is on one minor little issue, you know, compared to thousands of other issues that the state writes about. And so you see it as a lawyer, and I get that part, and you know I like legal stuff. But I see it as an implementing administrator. You know, is this important enough for me to ask, you know, a principal to do a 15th thing in addition to running school? And so I just said, you know, yeah, thank you.
And I would focus on, for example, in January when our auditors came, they're telling you that we're in compliance. We're in compliance with the financial matters, those big, you know, also big ticket items. So not only just in these policies and things that happen, but you're getting your information from other stakeholders who are telling you the district is being managed well.
No, that's one of the areas. So you have the rights of people. Then you have this thing, another of Danny's titles, which we'll take care of in a couple of months, called risk management, right? Okay, so she looks at our exposures that really might have nothing to do with the policies that we get from Sacramento. Right? It has to do with just good common sense and statutory guidance that's been accumulated over years of what you should do in your financial management, right, and insurance. And don't let people just go out and use our facilities without having proper insurance, that kind of thing.
Facilities, field trips, concussion management, I do all the risk management of those things to ensure not only compliance, but risk.
Okay, that's enough of that. That's it.
Can I ask one question? You said that, you know, with important matters, you hire an outside investigator. Is that typically a person with special training in that particular, like a lawyer, or what, you know, how do you make that determination?
It's typically depending on the issue. Like the issue that we had before us recently was I brought in a lawyer to do the investigation because of the significance or seriousness of the complaint, and it was legalistic, and it could be potentially legalistic in nature. So yes, I sit with Hank and we confer with all the complaints and decide who's going to review it, analyze it, write it, you know, etc. So it's something that we just sit together and just make the decision.
And the other example, that's a good one there. Another example, which I'd be happy to talk with new board members about, if a student is injured, on our premises, under the aegis and auspices and supervision of our people, and there's a complaint that the student wasn't properly supervised, then we might have an investigator come in and talk to the people who were involved in that. Has not generally been a lawyer. Right, it's been that insurance representative.
But he's under the guise of the lawyer. So when I send him out, so when I get all the student employee, anytime there's an incident, it comes through me and I review it. And I make the determination of whether I'm going to send out someone to do a background review of it. And that firm that I hired, but that's through our insurance, we'll go out and make the interviews and start a file and work on that potential, because he's working under our lawyer and our insurance program, which has our lawyer. So if something is going to come of a lawsuit, we are covered on that. So I do work and make those calls separately from these types of complaints.
Great. Any other comments, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous.
Hey, good job. Great job.
7.5.2, the Citizen Oversight Committee update.
Great job, Danny, on that other one. Okay, so I've written a paragraph here. You know that the application date was extended by 2 weeks from the original January 20th date, or 23rd date, actually. I'm sorry. No, yeah, 23rd. And so we actually now have one more applicant, so we're up to 16, and the deadline for applications is this Friday. I wrote to you earlier today, and that's why I distributed the blue update, in case you get a chance to read it. I've done some research, I won't say it's exhaustive, but I'm getting there, on how citizens oversight committees are best organized. And it sort of comes back a little bit to that theory of the January 20th meeting where, the superintendent can sort of do it on his or her own. The board can do it entirely, in which case, as I read it and as I talk to people, the entire process would need to be done in the view of everybody, which I think can be very difficult when you're trying to talk to people and trying to get honest answers. You want to have a collegial environment, but have it be intensive without having it be overbearing. And then the third approach is the one that I've recommended here. It was clear to me, going back to the December board meeting, that the board, particularly those of you who are involved with campaigns, the three of you were interested in having the board be very involved in the construction of this committee, and you have been. So the applications came into a central repository, which was monitored by Kathy as Secretary of the Board. And I'm recommending that the process of taking these 16 or maybe 17 or 18 applications be seeded, overlooked by and managed by, that was very elegant, managed by a committee that would be either chaired by one board member or co-chaired by two board members, so that it would be board run, that committee, that the way I would do it, and Mike did the same thing, anybody who's done personnel work, you have X number of applications, and you sort of think you have an idea as to how many people you want to interview from that group. So I would say that some number, but not all, likely, of the applicants, let's call it 16, would be interviewed for potentially the board appointing those people. Now, we know we need 7. We know we need 5 categories plus 2 at large. I don't have a number in my mind as to what it would be, but it could be 7 to more than 7. And so my recommendation, and I wanted to have this before you to discuss, and I think it's a good idea, is to have 2 members of this board step forward to be leaders of that group. I would certainly volunteer to participate. I'd like Annie to be involved. She'll still be with us. I think Josh Brown should be involved. He will have by far the most to do with the implementation of Measure J, more than more than Danny's successor. Okay, Josh. And then if the 2 board members would like to have other people there and would like to either ask those people themselves, or if you'd like me to help, that'd be fine. So whether we have, let's just say we do it the way I'm suggesting, whether we have 5 or 6 or 7 on the committee, it's probably getting about as large as you want to get. So that's my recommendation, that be the next step, that we go to February 6th, we step back, Kathy puts the materials together, presents those materials to a group of 5 or more, and then we decide together whom to interview and bring them in. It's going to take a while. Let's say interview 12 out of the 16. It's going to take a while. I mean, these are all very bright people, and it could take an hour plus, depends, you can narrow it, but let's say an hour for each one. It's a lot of time. You might decide you want to interview everybody. Nothing wrong with that, just X number more hours. So that's my recommendation. And then that group would put together a report that would go to the whole board, which means the other 3 board members. Read it, decide if you're satisfied with the recommendations of that group, and then appoint the committee at the March 11th meeting, or if for some reason you want to do it earlier, you could have a special meeting, but let's just say March 11th.
Does that happen in closed session?
No, it's open. The appointment would be...
No, I mean when we make recommendations about certain people and why we recommend
that would
them,
be,
or-
it wouldn't even be closed session. No, it couldn't be closed session. Let me start with that. It could not be. But the report to the board is a report, okay? So it's in open session in the sense that you would be talking about it, okay? And you would have to decide, I can't prescribe this for you, but you would have to decide how much you would want to say about, for example, I'll just pick a number, the 5 out of the 16 who weren't selected, And I think it becomes a matter of sort of how you want to treat names and categories, and it's just people who are not in the public body like we are. You all step forward to be very public. I obviously did. But these people, while the Citizens Oversight Committee meetings will be in public, I don't think they expected to have that person's name identified in public as not being chosen. I'm pretty sure they didn't. Okay? And you need not do that, but you would need to say who is on that.
But any interviews or discussions, we would be prohibited from having more than 2 board
Exactly,
members
that's it.
involved.
And, I've had 2 board members involved with a lot of things. I suggested that there might be 2 board members working with me and other people to interview the candidates for Danny's successor. So that's another 2. So you might be thinking like, which of those 2 things would I like to do more? Okay, and that would be 4 of you potentially, working on 2 very important issues.
Are there any thoughts or comments about this process?
I'd be interested in co-chairing.
Yeah.
Well, just broad thoughts first. I interacted with Hank on this today, and I have to say I started with the idea that it would be having gone through the process of being chosen or not chosen to be on the school board when you were chosen, Thane, and as you know, I paid toilet paper to your house after. No, but it was a public event. We did it over at whatever that is, Chaparral. That said, I think appreciate that. It may be a little bit different. Maybe it shouldn't be done. Maybe people wouldn't feel comfortable being in a big public forum. And I also think what makes it particularly hard is we don't know how big it's going to be. It's sort of, you got to sort of deliberate over how big it is and how many. I'm inclined, based on what I've seen on the list, I think all of them will be interviewed. But in terms of how to do it, I guess I've been convinced that something, subcommittee like makes sense. I think there's still a question of whether that itself needs to be televised or if it should be.
No, it doesn't have to be.
Okay. I guess it wouldn't be if but it would be public, wouldn't it? Or would it not necessarily? Okay.
No, not public because
Okay.
2 or 1 board member is
Okay.
involved.
But, there's some benefit, I think, to the letting people sort of have a private-ish kind of conversation about what their abilities are and what they think they bring to the situation. So,
Well, the application has some of
Yeah.
that as well.
Anyway, certainly if we're going to go in that direction, I'd like to be on it too. It's, but there may be others. We all talked quite a bit about it. I know.
I don't think I should be on, partly because I'm going to be leaving. I'm not going to be here for the March 11th meeting, and I'm going to be pretty busy getting organized to leave. So I think and you guys are going to be on the board for longer than I am, so I think that'd be good.
I like the idea of a subcommittee. I think it'd be really awkward any other way. And in terms of, our selections and stuff, it's very easy to focus on why we selected the folks that we did as opposed to
Absolutely.
why we left the others behind,
You bet.
right? And it's
You
much,
bet.
and that I'm very comfortable with that. And I think everybody that's applied understands that not everybody's going to get selected. And that we're trying to find a mix as well as the qualities. As long as when the subcommittee brings us recommendations, there's still an opportunity for us to amend that if necessary. And the specific thing I'm thinking is if you come with 7 and I don't see a mind that I would like to see there because of the spread of the roles, I'd like the freedom to propose some additional changes at that point.
Well, and that's really an interesting point, because let's say that happens. Let's say you see, this committee would be better with 8 and 9, okay? Well, the good news is, if everybody agrees with you that 8 and 9 are on the committee, I don't know if it's bad news. The other news is, they weren't selected initially, but that's okay, if that's part of, that I feel much more comfortable with if you're adding somebody, because you really like the person. We, the committee, were not, as successful as we might have been to identify all people. Okay, that's fine.
Now, Michael, are you interested in being on the actual?
Actually, I think I'll trust you two because I'm going to put my name into.
Danny said good?
Yeah,
Okay.
to interviews.
That's good personnel work.
Not
Nice thinking the
replacement,
same
but
thing. I'd
new
like
hire.
to interview.
See how nicely that worked?
Right, and I'm very comfortable with the 2 of you doing
I
that.
knew you'd say that. And the 2 of them.
And the 2 of you. So do we have a motion then to move forward with the committee selection with a subcommittee chaired by Jane and Kevin?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good, thank you very much.
And so we'll trust you two to work with Hank on how that committee is formed and how it operates, and then we would expect to get a recommendation March 11th.
Well before. I mean, it'll be to be acted on March 11th, but you will get that information. I'm setting a goal, you work backwards, okay? So the 7th is the Friday before that. I'm thinking right at the end of February into the early part of the week where March 7th ends. And I don't want it going out on Friday. This is too important. I don't want it going on Friday, be acted on Tuesday. This is something I'd like to get out for you.
On the subject, I think it's related enough for me to comment on it now. In my mind, we have not yet established, and maybe it's also something you talk about with the Citizens Oversight Committee, but the real scope of their work. We've talked about the law has minimums set up. I actually found online the California Citizens Oversight Committee Association, believe it or not.
Wow.
And it actually has some best practices. We may or may not agree with them, but they certainly go beyond what the minimum legal standard is. So, for example, I think, Michael, at one point you brought up something like you expected it to do more. I mean, there are things like quarterly meetings, there are things like biannual meetings with the school board, things like that.
Possible.
So, now does not feel like the moment. I mean, clearly now is not the moment, but maybe even not the next meeting. But I just certainly want that to be in play. I want to be on record as saying I think that's an issue in flux.
Well, I can tell you, just as a PS, in the numerous presentations I made on Measure J, when the issue came up and somebody asked about the Citizens Oversight Committee, and I had documents, and I showed them what you call the minimum, and that's true. I said my impression would be that in a small town where people know each other and can interact with each other well, that the scope of that committee would go beyond the minimum. I didn't state anything, but there are also some things that you don't want, and I won't go into it now. So, it's not a veto group, right? That's not what it is. But there's a big difference, big gap between veto and vetoing and being collegial, right? That's like sort of the ends of the continuum. So I'd like to see collegiality, not only among the members of the committee, but among the members of the committee, the district staff, and the board. That's my goal, okay, that we have great conversations. For instance, how are we going to spend that $10 million? Because we haven't had conversations like that very much. Okay.
Good conversation to have. Superintendent's report, 7.5.3.
Well, I said to the board that I wanted to just take a couple of minutes. I really will, because we had a couple of items that went pretty long, and we've been in this room a lot recently. And that's sort of what I want to talk about. Okay, so how about, no kidding. So I just want to talk about Saturday for a minute, because some people will be seeing this meeting and didn't see Saturday, and we did play it on. By the way, it worked. It was live. I got some reports. Kevin wrote to me, it worked. Kathy, congratulations. Whatever you did with Tom and David and James Hahn from the city, it worked. Hopefully this one will too. Anyhow, so, we're here the whole 5 hours, and I would just say, to summarize, 2.5 or so of those hours were used to learn about ourselves and talk about optimal ways for the board members individually to work, start with me, with the staff, with and through me, to become involved with school issues, how you best do that. And I won't summarize everything there, but if somebody wants to see the tape, I'll get it for you. But that took quite a while, but actually what took also quite a while that got us to noon was, I was thinking, Payne and I were talking a half hour, maybe a little bit more, of public comments. And so we were absolutely affirming of those people who came to speak. I mean, no one could ever say that people who wanted to speak didn't have a chance to speak. Now, tonight we had just one public comment. Okay, so that would be typical, maybe, of a regular board meeting, but we decided to be accommodating to people who came on a Saturday, which I thought was the right thing to do. There might have been a couple who spoke a little bit too long, but it was very well presented, whatever it was presented. And so that got us to noon. And then we had a pretty quick lunch. So by 12:30, we were back working. And we had an hour and a half then before we left to take a look at those two other issues. We call it 6B. 6A and B, those two issues that the titles were declining enrollment with some important things within parentheses after that, like finance and facilities and student achievement, etc. And the second item was how we might deal with school closures, if there are any, how we might deal with the selling or leasing of all or part of this property. And I think Thane and I had a really good talk today, and I hope the rest of you will agree that from this Saturday meeting, two things occurred. One, and I promise this, so it'll happen, I will bring to this board recommendations on, we just call them protocols, I'm not sure that's really the right term, but anyway, how we can best work together on issues that are important to you, that you'd like me to take a look at, and how do you become an effective board member in the right way, right? The right way of interacting with people, not overstepping, but not being held back either. So I will be bringing that forward, and I'm only going to bring it forward because I'm going to resend to you, maybe you misplaced it anyway, I did, those two documents that Joe Cotton brought to us. So, okay, good. Well, if you have them, anyway, I'm going to ask you to look at those and also think about other ways that you would like us to talk about in an agenda item how we can best operate together. That would be one. The second thing is, and this is where Thane and I spent our time today, in the March, April, no later than May period, we all, the 7 of us, 6 of us after March 11th, the 6 of us will have a chance to look at those other issues again. Okay, and I'm not going to say exactly how the declining enrollment issue is going to come to you for you to think about, or the selling or leasing, but they're both going to come back. Okay, and there will be formal agenda items with specified time. Now here's what might happen. I don't know what else is going to be on the agenda because it's impossible to predict all the business items. But what might happen is you're going to say, okay, let's take 20 minutes or 30 minutes to talk about that item. And we might just be scratching the surface, and you might say, and that's when we need a special meeting. Okay? We need but I don't want to have a special meeting before we force ourselves to talk about it. Because Thane's idea was, I think, right on. That at some point, it won't be March, although something's going to come in March on these issues, but it might be April, could well be, might be May. Each of you will be asked to help me by telling me this issue is really high on my agenda to look at. It's a non-starter or it's a maybe. Okay? Right? And you know what those issues are. How do we deal with declining enrollment? How are we going to deal with looking at some other properties than we now have? And, we had Mr. Lyra came and spoke about the 7-Eleven committee. I can't dispute what he said. This, CDE says superintendent and board shouldn't be involved. I called a lawyer and said it's no problem because they always are. So, it sort of goes back, Kevin, to what you said, that you can find people who make recommendations, on what to do. I think that the 7-Eleven committee report was actually spot on in terms of what we were asked to do.
Yeah.
But you might decide, well, we want to see other things. I want to do it again. I want to do it again. I want to do it again, do it again. And/or when it comes to the elementary enrollment, I think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about grades 7 through 12. When it comes to the K-6 enrollment, you might decide, that needs complete analysis by another committee, because it could end up in a recommendation to close one or more schools, in which case you have to have a 7-Eleven committee.
Yeah.
And now the other thing, Jane, is how we meld that with the master plan, okay? Because I can tell you right now, I think I told you before, the master plan won't replicate what Balfour Beatty did over all those months to create the March 31st report, right? That's like getting underneath the electricity lines, okay? That's not what it is. We're going to take a look at things like capacities, right? Capacities, how the schools are used, how the 5 schools are used, what it might look like if they weren't where they are now. That's what, I think that's my view of master plan. Because if it's any more than that, it's going to take a year, okay? And we don't want that. I think I'm positive we can finish a master plan sort of tailored by certainly the end of the summer. Well, let's just say the end of the summer. Okay, maybe earlier, okay? And that's what I want, I mean, I work with this all the time. I want you to feel comfortable, okay? And the last thing I would say about that is, as it relates to sort of the Citizens Oversight Committee and Measure J, and, I've had some conversations with you both today and before today, we have a lot of work to do to identify the kinds of genres of expenditures, whether it's roofing or electricity or plumbing or whatever, in those schools we know are going to be operating. And I don't want to predestine what a 7-Eleven committee, might view, but I know we're operating the junior high and high school, and I'm positive we're going to be operating some number of elementary schools. So, I'm very, very optimistic that between John's leadership that you heard today, Citizens Oversight Committee, Master Plan, the group around this table, that we can have the fortitude, that's what I can think of, fortitude, to address the key issues that I told people during the campaign the new board would address. I can't tell you how many times I said it, okay? Declining enrollment, elementary school and elementary schools, selling or leasing property, budget. And that's it, and I'm positive this group can do it. And I believe you have the fortitude to do it, and I believe some of you talked about it a lot during the campaign. So that's it, that's my superintendent's report.
Thank you. Items for future agendas. We've talked about a lot of things that will be on future agendas.
I was reminded, and I just thought of it now as we were going through the issue of the new, the FPM required aspects of our complaint procedure. I would love to find a way to take advantage of Danny's institutional knowledge, JPA knowledge, and look at how we're interacting with our PTAs and what have you in terms of those forms that we're asking them to sign. I brought it up before. I would just like to have some systematic approach to that where we can, because I totally understand the need to have, maximum coverage, legal, indemnifications and so forth, but I also understand the other side of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here's the deal. I know it's an issue. I know it's an issue.
Right.
Okay? And I think that we will take advantage of Danny's knowledge before she leaves. And when she leaves, then that's one of the things I'll be working on, because we won't have anybody else to work on it. So I think it's important to clear up why, frankly, the system that was, I won't say it was broken before Danny took it on, but it was pretty non-existent before Danny took it on, to bring clarity and, frankly, bring us up to 21st century standards in many cases. Now, in some cases, like anything else, when there's a change and when it seems tough, people will say, why are you doing that to me now? It was never done before. And I think at a minimum, it needs to be explained. Right? Beyond that, maybe there's some, and I know Danny agrees, there's some relaxation, that we can look at, right? We should, because we're not a big operation, we're not. It's not as if, we're in LA and we have, 150 elementary schools we have to worry about. So, okay, so that's it. That's what.
Can we do that on March 11th? Because you won't be here in April.
I don't know. I don't think, it's not something, I don't know. It isn't, it's there, that would be an example of, anything could be a board issue, but it would be an example of an administrative process, okay, that, how about this? Here's an agenda for future. At a minimum, it could be a board issue, and that I could explain, Danny, and I bless you, can explain what we're doing. Okay?
I think having a report on that.
Yeah, we can do that. Now, I don't know if there's going to be an action item, but I certainly can explain what we're doing, what we started to do in 2014 that wasn't done before that, and why. And then, you all can...
And then once there's a report, we can see if it makes sense to have an action item.
Exactly. I don't know, is that
And we
what-
can talk about it and ask questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I do have comments on that as well.
For sure, yeah.
Well, I also think, Hank, you could, it sounds like we all agree it would be nice to as you just said, small town, to the extent we can,
I do.
loosen up a little, so maybe when you come.
I'll be honest with you, Danny and I, I don't know how many hundreds of issues we've interacted on. I would say in 90% of the cases, we pretty much agree from the beginning and the end. We do have a different view on this one. We do. Okay, and that's because we come from different perspectives. That risk management piece, right? Okay, that's her life. My life is making sure that we optimize the way people interact in the district on behalf of the kids. Okay, it's not to say she doesn't care about it, she does, but she needs to care about that other piece, and I need to care about this piece. So watch out after April 3rd, because, no.
Buses without drivers.
Exactly. Just go wherever you want to go.
No seatbelts.
Go wherever you want to
It's
go.
called checks and balances, actually. That's
It
good.
is. No, this is one of those.
That's
Okay, so we'll do that.
Great. Anything else? I think that's good. We've got a lot of things on tap. All right, consent calendar. Motion to approve.
All approval. I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Aye. And now we need to address in open session the items from closed session.
You good? So first of all, there's some language that Danny, you recommended. Right, okay, you recommended, which will be what? What do we want to do?
I didn't know
I
if you
mentioned
were-
this at the beginning.
Oh, at the closed session earlier?
No, you had recommended language that the board should approve an open session to change the date, right?
Yes,
Okay.
what I'm asking is if the board will postpone the hearing that was scheduled for today in closed session for March 11th. So that's what I'm asking the board.
And do we need a motion?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll
yes.
move.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Unanimous?
Okay, and then we had a good conversation in closed session, as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, regarding this particular student whom we're determined to help, and I recommend that the board approve the expulsion to be assigned to our learning center for student ID 8004148.
Do we have a motion?
So,
A second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Unanimous? Aye. Are there any comments before we adjourn?
It's 2 hours before the last time we adjourned, the last meeting.
Good comment.
Before January 20th meeting was 10 o'clock, it's only 8.
The more you comment, the later we get. All right.
That was fast.
No, that was good. We adjourn the meeting of the Ojai Unified School District until March 11th.
And it's a Wednesday.
Wednesday, yes, it's a
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Oh, don't forget.
Yeah, that was.